I don't know what road bumps could come up today, Duncan. I'm up for all of them.
Well, in many ways, it's a very apt word, isn't it? Episode. So let's see if we indeed have an episode or not.
What?
No, you have to understand, mate. I've learned a long, long time ago. It's not a lot of heroes in this world. You know, there's a lot of guys who stand back while the bad guy with the gun, shoots people, and they just later tell people, "Oh, I wish I could."
Yeah.
In that moment, I should have. I think back on it, but in that moment, it's better not to be a hero. So as I learned when Weldon came on the show, when a whole bunch of people came on the show, it's a lot of people. They're very amiable. It turns out when they get on the show, everything just goes really smoothly. Not a lot of problems. So,
I like where this is going.
Yeah, everyone ready to begin, Yeah. I mean, the thing is, on this show, we don't do things like just dismiss our opinions we don't agree with out of hand without making any points to it. LS. Sorry? What? Didn't you say something about LS? No, never mind. My mistake.
What's an LS?
Just someone you treated with complete contempt, basically. But does that narrow it down enough for you?
No. Give me more.
Right,
Give me
okay.
more, Duncan. Let's do this.
Okay. Right, this is episode 50 of Listen Loco. So we brought on the oldest man in League of Legends, PapaSmithy.
I think I'm technically second or third, but I'm up there, sadly. When I started, I wasn't, but I feel like everyone older than me retired or transitioned games, and then I'm like top 2 or 3 now. Still got Riv. Riv is still alive. Riv keeps me honest.
I mean, there are occasional sightings of him, so we can, in fact, confirm he is alive. And what role?
Well, something most people don't know, Kobe is older than me.
What?
I look way older than him, but he is actually older than me. He's 1986, so he's 1 year older. But everyone else, fair game. I'm older than them.
What?
Fair enough.
I know, right? Kobe's keeping up the youthful...
He's just looked the same for about 10 years, hasn't he? That's the thing.
Got the Leslie Nielsen thing going on.
To be fair, he also hit the perfect sweet spot of already being good looking, but then hitting that period about 3 years ago where we actually got proper makeup and lighting and stuff that made everyone just look better on camera. So he's we'll never know really unless we see basically what I need you to do, Kobe, is do one of those posts that girls do when they're compliment fishing, where they do the picture of themselves with no makeup on. They're like, this is who I am. So just, if you're going to judge me, then just, this is who I am, all right? And I'm not afraid to show who I am. So do that picture for me, Kobe, in the morning, right after you washed your face. That's all you've done. You haven't put any of those, Patrick Bateman-style cleansing products on or anything. Nothing to your skin. Don't get the makeup yet. Just show me that picture. And I'll tell you what, as much as I've built that up as though it'd be terrible, I bet it still look fucking amazing.
I'm already ready to respond stupid sexy Kobe. He's got it going on. What can we say?
Indeed. Right. Let's get the episode underway, shall we?
Let's go.
Well, I notice, actually, one thing I want to ask at the beginning, right, is for some reason, Loco does insist on his shows and doing something that I personally never did on any of my shows, which is I never reveal who's turned down the show or who I think I can get in a future episode. And the reason I personally don't do it is, nobody's obliged to appear on my shows. If someone says no, I don't want to, put external pressure on them. Likewise, if someone hasn't yet come on the show, I don't want the people, all their fans, to be like, when are you appearing on that show? It's it's up to the person whether they do or not. But Loco has implied a whole bunch of times that he would get you on this show, you were going to come on the show or something. So was it a similar sentiment for you? Was it a long-awaited reunion with Loco?
I mean, with both of you, right? I actually met both of you for the first time almost exactly 5 years ago.
Wow.
I met you, Duncan, at the Najin Shield Samsung Blue final when I came to stay with Christopher, Monte Cristo to most people. And Obscurica was there as well. We were staying at his place. My first time to Korea, I was interviewing with OGN to potentially cast the second season of OGN Masters, which doesn't mean a lot to most people, but would have been the second season of their Pro League-esque, organizational battle that kind of became LCK, right?
Yes.
In many ways. It would have been Monty and Doa as the champions casters, and then Masters, which was going to happen at the same time, would be Chobra and I. So we would have been 2 duos. A lot of things changed since then, but I think I might have met Loco 1 year later, because I signed for OGN right after spring finals. So I either met you at the same time as Duncan 5 years ago or 1 year later when I actually signed. There was a 1 year delay there, but that's when I met Thorin. I did a Summoning Insight, like April 2015 when I was a
Holy shit, you
OPL
know the
caster.
date.
And then, 4 years later, here we are. I've never actually done any content with you under the LCK banner. So we saved it all for this. Today's the day. Mark your calendars, baby. Let's go.
Well,
So what is the actual premise for this one, Loco? Like, what topics do you have in mind? Because I noticed, actually, you might not be aware of this, but I saw on his YouTube that PapaSmithy actually did a review of the LCS final.
yeah,
So as far as I know, he actually has watched all the major region finals.
we should definitely mainly
Yeah.
talk about LCK. We'll sprinkle in some LCS in there because that's what the viewers want, and then let's finish off with MSI.
Is Loco quite low for you, by the way, in terms of
Is he?
microphone?
He's like maybe like 10% too soft, but I don't know if I want like harsh Loco, like too overtuned either. So it's whatever. If it's
You're not going to
if it's
get
how I know.
harsh, Loco. You have to understand, he's been broken on the wheel of life like quite a lot the last few years. We're all trying to sort of like, even when you flame him, just go a little bit easy. Like, leave a bit of wiggle room so you can sort of escape, you know.
I mean, I thought I
Thanks.
knew who Loco was. I think he's developed a heart of gold over the last 4 years. I think, but I don't know that. So
Just develop the
I
heart.
Okay. That's the start, right?
The key distinction, yeah. But
Wait,
he
when
has
did,
become a bit nicer. He has become a bit nicer.
when did you know me? Like at the start, what did you know me as? Was it when I was back still playing pro?
No. I mean, like we talked for the first time ever, really long time ago. You definitely won't remember this. When I was doing my first international tournament, it was like AEL Enter the Dragon in 2012, 13.
2012? Holy shit.
You were on Nudge and Shield, I think.
Wow.
No, maybe you were just on StarTale. But you were still playing, and I got the Korean client, and I was trying to do research. So I was like, okay, who speaks English and like is on the Korean client? And I reached out to Lilac, which is another name no one has heard of at the time. I knew he spoke English because he played on CLG, and talked to him. And then I think you was just Locodoco on the client, or maybe you were like Nudge and Shield Locodoco or StarTale Locodoco, whichever one it was. And you accepted my friend ad, and we talked a bit in prep for that tournament. So
Wow.
that's when we first spoke a very long time ago.
I don't even remember that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of stuff. Just like Duncan, like we both lived through a whole lot of League of Legends. So given that we always kind of had that historian kind of side to us, it was a long time ago. And then after that, it was again like an after party for a final. You were boasting about.
Oh
romantic
no! Oh no! 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 Don't get stop!
And then the rest is
please
history,
no!
right?
Please no! Thank you. Oh my god! If it was after finals, was it spring finals? No, it
Probably.
He
could not.
just said,
Yeah.
yeah. He's just said.
It was a spring finals,
The one
2014 or
that
15.
Blue won over Nudge and Shield.
Well, who was there? Who was the crowd?
You have to explain more than that. You mean at the after party?
Yeah, after party. Who was there?
I mean,
was like-
Monty and all the rest of them, I assume. It was just,
Duncan was there.
you're on about the Washik, right? The company meeting.
Yeah.
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 It was one of those, but like we were on like the foreigner table at the time, I think. So it was like mostly
Yes.
us and Loco came along.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Loco, what you're forgetting is this, right? Is at this company after party, like when we say after party, even that's hyping it up for all the fans watching, like way more than it is. It's not. There was no like club. There wasn't like basically everyone just goes for a dinner together, right? And unlike normal, this wasn't one of those Korean barbecues where everyone could fit around one table. It was like actually sort of like a traditional, almost like an Italian restaurant where like each table's like maybe.
Okay, I think I remember now. Yeah.
And the downside of this, unfortunately, is that meant some of us were on the table that was really interested, and then some of us were all just on the table where it's like just nobody, just on our own, like no one to talk to, and just three Korean people just going like, "So, why'd you come Korea?" It's like, get me out.
Do you
of
like
here, I can't do it."
bibimbap?
Exactly, like that sort of conversation. So all I can say is I remember that because I was on the little kids table. Meanwhile, Papa somehow snuck under the fucking wire to get
can I
onto the
say?
good table where you could hear all the, at the time, juicy banter. Because you have to realize at the time, we were nobodies relative to everyone else. Like, as I said, we literally, this is the sad thing about Korea. Maybe you can speak to this actually, Loco. It took a long, long time before Koreans ever really gave a fuck about the rest of the world of esports. So, for example, the first few years I went to these events where I went and saw Monty and all the rest of it, as far as everyone in OGN and the whole event was concerned, I could have just been his friend from back home who knew nothing about esports. Like, they didn't know anything about any of us. They didn't particularly care, quite frankly, actually. Like, I'll say the questions would just be the most obvious ones you'd ask a foreigner, why did you come to Korea? What do you think of barbecue or something? Simple stuff like that. But like they didn't even seem to understand. Even when Monty would tell people naively, like, this is Thorin, he is a journalist from the West who's been on for many years, they would just give him that thing of like, oh, is he a little friend here? Is he all right? And they would just be going, well, you tried again, Monty. Don't do that next time. So.
For Korean esports, traditionally, the only thing the West has been is they give you the game, they make the game, but other than that, they're just like really non-existent. Where StarCraft was completely self-sufficient without Blizzard or any kind of Western media, and people imagine League of Legends would kind of be the same way. They were probably very surprised.
I think it's also important to note that, like, for the longest time, Western esports was like, Korean esports was established like, in the early 2000s, right? It was already like a big thing, like in terms of crowds and production and stuff like that. And the West had the little things that came around, like Counter-Strike had a couple of events, and there was esports around, but it was on such a different scale that I think the Koreans kind of always looked at it as like, we're the established like civilization over here, and then you hear about like a small thing happening over there, and you're like, oh, how quaint, and you like continue on with your thing. So it took a long time for them to like fully understand that there was legit esports to the degree that Korea was already doing. And I think thus, like, if you were the the global journalist or the global caster, the assumption was that wasn't something to put too much thought into. And I think it took a lot, like the LCK and LCS and the Riot side, like, there was no big StarCraft 1 or 2 scene. Like two came up, but 1 especially there wasn't. Mm-hmm. So given that the chief game in Korea was StarCraft 1 into League of Legends, kind of with like a blip of StarCraft 2, they just never had to think about the West. And it was only until much later, I think Thorin's on the mark, like it's only the last few years where the global scene, like China winning Worlds is like ultimate confirmation it's a global scene, and not just Korea gets the #1 ribbon and other people are there to like be runners up. So the global scene is a real thing now. Like when I get to like Lowell Park and I'm prepping with the Korean analysts, they're talking about what's happening in LPL, Challengers, NA, EU, and that would, like, Cloud Templar would once off ask me questions about that in years past, but this is the year where people are noticing, like, the blinkers are off, and like it's no longer tunnel vision on even just Korean League of Legends. Like, it's a much more global game now.
Well, along those lines then, one thing that we could definitely talk about as a side topic is the fact that since we're going to talk about MSI and we're going to contrast some of the teams, etc., I thought an interesting side topic is when the first Korean exodus happened. So actually, funnily enough, exactly the time period we were talking about, the sort of like end of 2013, early 2014. Oh no, it was actually the year after that. Sorry, it would have been the end of that season. When that first happened, I remember that a lot of people like Monty, etc., one of the reasons they were very critical of the Korean exodus is because they thought like their logic went like this: even if you get the best Koreans, but you don't have an all-Korean lineup, you're already going to have like a somewhat limited ability to succeed versus 5 similarly good Koreans and no language barrier. So to him, he always thought it was actually like kind of folly to bring in the Koreans as Chinese teams. And even though in some degree he was right, I actually think he maybe was a little bit too hasty on that. Because to be fair, when you look at the first Korean exodus, a lot of the teams that got those players, it didn't really even seem like they had like a mentality behind why they were getting that specific player. It's almost like they just went out and said, get me some Korean world champions. And so, for example, famously, like Vici signed Mata and Dandy, probably the best supportive core in the entire world. But that was
actually like a duo that had sense to sign together, at least. That wasn't just like
but then
flashy player.
But even then, though, that one didn't work because then they didn't have the pieces around it, So like, I actually think the reason I'm setting it up like this is because at the moment with Invictus Gaming, who's won Worlds and now the LPL, now you find yourself in a very different world because these aren't even just players who left for the money. These are players who legitimately are as good as any Korean player at their position. And by all accounts, will probably never go back to Korea now. Like Rookie, he's been there for so long. Apparently, he's one of the few Korean players who actually likes China, has a girlfriend there, etc. The Shy has been in China for many, many years. Is apparently paid like mega bucks and shows no interest in coming back. So if Korea ever thought like, oh well, they're just like the sort of like the dysphoria or whatever of the people going out of our scene briefly, but we'll get them back if they're good enough. It's like actually Korea isn't necessarily in the best position for some of this talent. And then you look at all the names that have gone elsewhere. Like, I'm sure some of these other players could have signed with Korean teams, Gorilla, etc., if they'd still wanted to. So what do you think of where the Korean scene is at the moment and this kind of, like, siphoning off of some of the talent?
So It's a really complex question because you're probing multiple different things at the same time. So if we think of the time frame you're alluding to, 2014, the big thing to talk about there is the players that were looking to other offers were playing in the champion system, right? Like I'm sure LCK had been like pre-discussed, but it would have been like, mostly under wraps and not full details out there. They were playing best of twos, single round robin. If you don't get out of groups, you're boned. And then like, do you have a team for the next split? Do you have a career? Like the step down to NLB challenges at the time was big. Like that was at a time where people weren't thinking of League of Legends careers as firmly as they are 5 years later. Like at the time, money was a really big thing. Korea famously, was not the place to be for money. And the Chinese offers were, we want flashy players to come to our league because Korea always wins. And we're going to use them to sell our new streaming platform. Streaming was exploding. So they were going to win-win, right? And win the international events or LPL and win internationally as well. So that was from the player's perspective, very much that's a lot of money. My mother could do with this, like my family's not doing so well. Like the money argument was, I think, the biggest draw, and probably also travel and the cutthroat nature of Champions format getting to people. And then over time, it's like some people went over and hit it big. And then some came back. Like you think of the 2-year Koreans, like Def Mata, for example, where Mata Yes didn't have a good first year. Second year was a lot better. And then was lured back to be on KT. Deft, who was a household name. Like Kingzone Dragon X, like when they have their fan group, they have a huge fan group. And you always know it's Kingzone fans because the percentage of fans speaking Chinese is way higher. There's a huge Chinese fan base, even at Lowell Park. Some of them fly in from China just to watch Kingzone, mostly because Deft is so popular. And Porn also, sure. is also a popular player. But they had their 2 years, they made their money, and they came back to win Worlds. That was the kind of elevator pitch of how that happened. You have a player like Rookie who didn't win, but like you say, kind of grew to understand the language. And the language learning part is kind of, to me, the big thing is the people that stayed, it feels like, the Froskuren and some of the other casters are career Koreans, right? And it's just that at this point, they're so used to China, they've developed the language skills, so that gives them a lot of currency, whether it's for streaming or just like, quality of life. Like, I think we got the phases of like, a lot of people went to chase money. Some of them did well, some of them didn't, and made the decision on whether to come back to Korea. And they had the lifespan of 2 years. And then now you have kind of these Koreans who have been there a long time, who are now there for a lot longer. So I think the motivations shifted a lot. And now you don't have the mixed language roster problem. And to come back to your question, if you're rating the players' decisions about like what team to go to in 2014, 2015, they weren't thinking long term. They were thinking much more short term. And the Chinese teams weren't also thinking long term either. They were mostly thinking about the bump in the next split and the bump in ratings on the streaming contracts and stuff like that. But over time, now it's very much like an established industry. Now you're planning long term. People are thinking about multiple splits away. Like it feels like we have to judge kind of team composition in terms of like languages and stuff so differently, because yes, the sunk cost of bringing a Korean on in 2015 might not have paid off on your streaming numbers and things like that. But now Rookie's been in China for so long, and maybe he'll qualify for residency eventually. And in the kind of long scale term of things, he's learned the languages now as like a permanent asset forever, kind of like TSM imported Bjergsen because they thought he would be a great player. And then he also got the bonus of being a resident over time. I feel like developing the languages and like thinking of things long scale, it's so many different ways to judge those moves. So to come back to Monty's ideas, with how League was at the end of 2014, I think it was likely to be, okay, this roster has mixed language. We can't communicate as high. We're never going to reach the heights of a Korean team. But if Monty had known that League was still a strong game 5 years later, and some teams were willing to play that long game where skill would be the kind of start of things, and then actually applying yourself, learning the language would be the ultimate payoff, then we judge it differently. So it's like so many different variables to judge, but it's fascinating it's gone the way it did now. And I guarantee everyone, like when Rookie moved over, he wasn't making a 5-year plan, but it like evolved to be now maybe a lifetime plan.
Well, so if you talk about Korean imports, like the very, very first few Korean imports would be like me, and then Insect, Seraph, and Lustboy. Like when Insect, Seraph, Lustboy, like these,
And Zero as well.
and Zero, like when these Koreans went over to China and NA, it was mostly because of shitty things happening in Korea for them personally, or they couldn't get onto the level of teams that they wanted. And as for teams taking them on, I thought these teams taking them on had very specific needs. Like CLG needed a top laner, TSM we needed a support. It was when Glebe went crazy. So I thought like those initial ones weren't that bad, and it was good for both the player and the teams mostly. And then when you get to the Chinese, like the Mega Exodus, me and Thorin, we've discussed this multiple times, but Korean teams, especially the KESPA teams, KT, SKT, Samsung, CJ, like they used to run kind of a cartel system where in StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, everyone would know everyone, and they could gate the salaries. They could be like, no one's getting paid above 100K. We're not going to pay anyone above 100K. Like, let's all agree to this. And then you couldn't go any higher than that. And because there was no other team you could go to, like if you were a top tier Korean player, okay, KT is willing to pay me 100K, SKT is willing to pay me 100K, like I can't go anywhere. And that kind of broke open with the foreign teams entering. Now when Samsung, they were about to renew their contract with their previous 10 players on Samsung Ozone, players on Samsung Blue, they told them the kind of numbers that they were willing to give, and the Samsung players like, what the fuck, we just won Worlds, like we are at the absolute highest in terms of our market value, like why aren't we getting paid? And then they were very angry about it, and then China became an option for them, and all 10 of them plus the coaching staff, they were like, okay, fuck you Samsung, we're gonna go to China's willing to pay us. So they just all went as a package deal somewhat, and people randomly ended up on teams. Like a lot of times it wasn't planned. It was like Deft and, or not Deft, was it Mata and Dandy wanted to play with each other. Everyone wanted to play with Mata. Def wanted to play with Mata. Imp wanted to play with Mata. But Mata wanted to play with Dandy. So those two went as a group. And then the other two just paired up and they went to whatever team would take them. So it was very sporadic and it wasn't very well planned out. And that's why I do think a lot of the Chinese plus the initial Korean teams like really didn't work. But nowadays, and also to talk a little bit on Korean viewpoint and Korean teams viewpoint and Korean players viewpoint, people look down on me and people look down on Lustboy for going to NA, and they viewed it as, oh, they went to NA because they can't make it in Korea. And then nowadays, viewpoint to going to NA, China, or Europe is going to NA, China, Europe is good if you can't get on the absolute, if you can't get on SKT, if you can't get on like a championship contending team, you should go to a foreign country. Like
if you're not going to Worlds in Korea, go to Worlds somewhere, I guess is kind of a way to look at it.
Yeah. So viewpoint outside looking in, like how people take in Korean has changed. They're much more strategic about it, and they're much more picky about which Koreans they bring in. And it's not just like, oh, there's a Korean, we should get that Korean. And also Koreans going overseas, the viewpoint has changed a lot too. It's not, oh, Korea isn't working out first, we're going to go overseas. It's, if I don't have something that's really good for me in Korea, it's better to go overseas.
And our game has lived long enough now that there could have been initial failures, learning processes, and these things that happened in 2015, 2014, 2016 to some degree. And now we're so far out the other end that whether you got stuck in and got some like streaming results, or you stayed back and now you're thinking about the right import, like the game has changed so much in terms of just how much there is around LoL esports now that like, it's so hard to gauge. And a lot of fans have joined, you know, after all these years and try to apply the now model that works to like the Wild West of 2014, 2015. It's so much has changed, and we are the richer for it now. But I think the teams in 2015 that made those big bets, like Loco's saying, they weren't necessarily like gauging all the things they needed to gauge, like we know in 2019.
They wanted, for the Chinese teams taking in the Samsung players, they wanted the best players in the world. They were like, okay, just give me two. I don't care which two, just give me two. And then that's literally a lot of times that's how it happened.
Because what makes me always uncomfortable is whenever the discussion happens of like, where is Korea in the global rankings? Because obviously within that context, people do that thing where if a player's in a region, they just count him as part of that region. So for example, you would hear people after Worlds saying, oh, Korea fell off compared to China. It's like, did we just watch the same tournament? I just saw two of the best Koreans of all time just hard carry the Chinese team to the title. Like, the problem I have with that whole topic is like, we'd have to actually see all the Koreans in Korea to really know how strong Korea could be. Because for people who don't know, if you watched this split of LCK and you didn't watch the LPL in the past, you're like, holy fuck, this Clid guy's amazing. Where was he all this time? Well, if you don't know, he isn't even the only one. There are a bunch of players like that in China. Like, for example, the player who's basically following in the same career path Clid had in China is the player called Flawless, who was playing in like a team recently.
I mean, we got him in LCK at least, right? But
that was a while back. He was kind of one of those like hadn't made it yet at the time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But like on the one hand, first of all, I'd love to know what would happen if you ever did have all the Koreans back, because like I think of a lot of that discussion is artificially propped up by Koreans who are elsewhere who are very good. I mean, even if you want to go for NA, would Team Liquid be as good right now without Core JJ? I don't think so somehow. He's one of the best supports in the world, and if the salaries were the same everywhere in the world, he'd probably be on like KT Rolston or something. He wouldn't be on Team Liquid, would he?
I mean, the smack talk about, I think it was Perks' smack talk about talking about how many EU mid laners there will be at Worlds, because the 3 NA teams expected to go all have, European mid laners. Obviously, Bjergsen's, an American citizen and thing like that. But it is hard, and you do have to use conventional logic, but it's not as bad as Overwatch, right? Where they're going to have huge like geolocation but full Korean lineup kind of discourse and like amount of like dissonance going on there. Like, at least for League, you do have the 3-2 system mostly, apart from like Bjergsen and a couple of other kind of exceptions. But yeah, I mean, when I first joined LCK, like I for sure was one of those people like who at like the end of 2015 summer, my first split was like ear to the ground being like, all right, who's leaving to China for 2016? Like, oh no, we're gonna lose this player, my league is ruined. Like, but then you heard more and more about like what Loco was alluding to, like why people left the year before, and the real struggle players had for pay in Korea at the time. And also I got to know these people as well, and you saw like all the stats came out. Like at the time, like 4 or 5 years ago, the average pro player was like the average pro player's like career length was like 1 split or something. Like obviously it's maybe that's not the right metric to use, like medium versus mode, etc. But regardless, the average was 1 split. And you were like, when you heard someone was going to go overseas and get paid, like when you finally got on the ground, like interacted with these like young people, like person to person, it very quickly evolved to go out there and like make some money and like make a life. Like, we don't know how long League of Legends is going to be around. And I think a lot has changed since then, in that Korea eventually started to take some notes from the other regions, and pay overall has risen since then. And career length, like it feels, has never been longer. Like, I don't know, a new player debuting now who's like obviously good enough to play and like a starting top 5-6 team. Like, what would be a realistic kind of career length to project now that League is franchised and seems to be around for the at least medium term, maybe long term? Like, the calculations are so different now. So it's definitely less of an issue. And like Loco was saying, everyone knows people importing less, but it's evolved a lot. Like, we're all kind of elder statesmen of League of Legends, and we could have asked the same questions in 2012, 2014, 2015, 2019, and give way different answers.
One aspect that is a corollary to this topic, which is never addressed, I almost have never heard it on any League of Legends podcast, is where's all the missing money in Korea? Like, what you are told is the fantasy story of Korean esports. I always give the analogy whenever people have asked me about the history of Korean esports, that it's like the stories that existed in, like, I guess it would be like it'd be like Renaissance era Europe of like, El Dorado in South America. Oh, there's a city of gold, and if you go there, it's everything, riches, amazing weather. And the idea is, it's obviously a fantasy. It's like a projection of what you wish was the case. And crucially, the reason I'm giving the example of they're telling it in Europe is it's the sort of crap you say when you're in a bumfuck village in the middle of nowhere of like, oh, that's what happens if you go elsewhere and take on adventure. You know, you could have this incredible life. Well, similarly, if you were in the 2000s in esports, that's what people did with Korea. They took these aspects that were real of Korea. Like, for example, it was on television. It had its own channels that were part of gaming programming. It had finals that had 10,000 people there, and it had nice salaries for players. Actually, even at the time in StarCraft 1, nice salaries for the modern day of esports. You know, these things all were very, very accelerated. What people ignored was those were the only areas that it actually had developed at a very, very rapid level. In fact, one area that Western esports has killed Korean esports dead is development of like revenue, investment, and the amount of monetization. If you look at Korean esports now, logically, if they have TV channels that broadcast the games, they have all these players that you see in ranked, you see commercials on the subway trip. Where are all their salaries to play these players? Why can't even the best Korean team pay all of their players anywhere close to what the best Chinese team do?
Because they don't need to. It's that simple. If they could have
That's
always...
not the way market economics work, Loco. So I know what you mean when you say that, but like you got to expand on that. Like, what do you mean by they don't need to?
So previously, because of the cartel system, they never needed to, because they were the only teams willing to pay them money. Like, you couldn't take your talents elsewhere. And this was also before streaming. So now there's so much avenues a player can take if a team isn't willing to pay them. If a Korean team isn't willing to pay me, I can go stream on Twitch. I can go stream on Africa. I could go to China. I could go to Europe. I could go to NA. I have so much more options. But 5 years ago, there weren't those options, so teams didn't need to pay them. And also, Korean esports is a little bit different from North American esports. Now, North American esports, in a way, looks a lot similar to Korean esports, where it's not about... Actually, North American esports, most teams are losing money, and they're fine losing money because they're betting in the future that the league will be huge, or League of Legends and LCS will be huge. That's why they're willing to spend that kind of money. In Korea, it was never about profitability. Like, it wasn't about teams like SKT making money by paying teams to win. SKT were willing to pay players because it was a form of advertisement for all the Kespa teams, CJ, KT, Samsung, SKT, the ones I might have missed. It was all about advertisement. As SKT, as Samsung, as these giant global mega Korean brands, I want to be recognizable to the younger audience, so I'm willing to pay them. So they have the money, and it is like Korean players and Korean esports, to them, is a form of advertisement, and if they see value in it, they'll pay. And another reason they don't need to pay as highly is because the influx of talent that Korea has. Even with people always leaving, there's still new League of Legends talent coming up every single year in LCK. And this year it was a little bit different, where people actually failed with the newish talent. Like, KT failed miserably with the newish bot lane. Genji didn't have new players. Genji just managed their team like really badly. But teams never felt the need to pay players because the replacement that's coming up would be like 80%, 70% as good, and maybe even have potential to pass the players they lost due to how good they were. So yeah, there was never a need. But nowadays, where people failed, I do think teams might look at it differently.
I think another thing worth to note is that Korea in general, like, minimum very low here, and people, like, the average wages, if you convert them to US dollars, aren't high wages for especially young people. Like, it's very hierarchical, and you have to work at a company for a long time to earn real wages. So I kind of think about it how, a lot of people who finish, like, university, teach abroad, teach English, right, in some Asian regions. And the payment is usually, if you try to work, how much am I saving to, like, buy a house when I get back from Asia? Like, it's pretty low, but it's high for, like, your purchasing power in that country. And I think in general, like, because Korean salaries are low, Korean esports salaries were also low until there had to be a nod to this person has transferable skills that can take them international. So, like Loco's saying, there being a reliable demand for Korean players in NAEU China was one of the things that pushed up overall salaries for pro players in Korea, because there was actually, real competition for these Korean pros. It's like Korean casters have the problem, right, where, if you're not on the Riot LCK broadcast, Korean broadcast as a Korean caster, you can't go to China and cast. You don't speak Chinese. So there's such a very small kind of purchasing market there. And esports was only a Korean market for StarCraft, right? And it's only really, again, turning off those blinkers and understanding that it's an international market. And with that, kind of more pay within a global context is becoming common. And definitely from the big teams, you'll see that. But it's just, yeah, it wasn't the El Dorado from an international context in those days, even for the top enders. Like they made a lot, but yeah, it's just there's a lot of asterisks on the story, and you don't get told there's asterisks when they're selling something sexy like, wow, they're on television, they're real.
Sure. Because like for anyone, what I'm setting up here for people who don't appreciate this is don't expect this trend to reverse. Like, even though I alluded, I would like a world in which Faker and Rookie played every week in LCK, and Flawless and Clade were all in LCK, and Gimgoon comes back and has his chance to be a star player in LCK. Even though this would be a great thing, I think, for Korean League of Legends, it will basically never happen, with the exception of when someone like Daft or Meta just personally decide to come back for whatever reasons they have. Because if you look at the way the Korean esports scene has worked, the real area that they're missing all that money is they don't have any of the VC money. The only team in Korea that has big VC money is Gen G. And that's because if you look into it, even though the CEO has a Korean name, as far as I know, I think he's actually a second generation immigrant and he's from Silicon Valley. So they're like partly Korean, partly elements of the Western Silicon Valley crowd that gets all the VC in. So if anyone's wondering, there's two aspects there that I think are interesting. One is that, in line with what Loco said about kind of the cartel sentiment within Korean esports, that is very unwelcoming to foreigners. So that's why I would suggest this guy maybe had the in to be able to get a team in Korea. I don't think if you come along and, like, I'll give you a fictional example. Let's say some Arab sheik got really into League of Legends and he decides, as they want to do, this is going to be my plaything. So instead of buying a European Premier League team or some sort of, like, I don't know, something else they'd get, like flying over some fucking David Blaine to do tricks for me, I'm going to buy a League of Legends team. And you know what? I've heard Koreans are the best. So I'm going to get a Korean team. I'm going to get an LCK team. I don't know if he would actually be able to. Like, if you know how business tends to work in esports over there, you have to partner with Korean people. They have kind of like a very clever system to keep it insular to their scene, or make it so that at the very minimum, if you're buying in, they somehow are also like benefiting from it. And it's like, you can't just come like you could in America and just buy a team tomorrow and get into the situation. And it's like, it's a free for all. Everyone comes in, you're welcome. If you've got the money, you can make it. So there's that aspect, which at the moment makes it look like there's not going to be much of an influx of VC into Korea. And then secondly, I have to say, if you look at the global scene, a lot of the people who have the VC money don't seem that eager to get into Korea, actually. Like, I know the Gen G people initially mainly got in to get the Overwatch League slot. That was like the main thing that was their apple of their eye at the time. So if you look at the whole global scene with all the different regions, it doesn't seem like people who are outside of Korea feel like the Korean market's that essential to capture.
So I have been helping some people interested.
Leaks.
I have been helping some people interested and advising them in the past, because LCK closed, LEC closed, and LPL is closed. So new giant mega orgs that want to come into and have League of Legends teams, the only option that's open for them is LCK now in terms of franchising. There is rumors of expansion in NALCS. We don't know if that's going to be in 2020, 2021, or 2022. So when they want something more immediate and when they want to have League of Legends on their kind of team roster, the only real direction they can look to is getting a Korean team. So there are people interested in, like, there are Western organizations and Western companies interested into getting into LCK, but it's not going to be easy for them. So far from what I've seen, I don't think it's going to be easy for them. And there are still mega orgs in Korea that want a spot back. Like, CJ definitely wants their spot back into LCK and into having a League of Legends team. And there's other teams beyond CJ that want a spot back in Korea. So it's going to be very hard for, I would say, like the VC teams or the mega American corps to get an LCK spot when they do franchise in the future.
And a small point is that obviously we are the only region that still has, like Loco was saying, a promotion relegation. The orgs that would be kind of the least established, like, you're not going to buy a Hanwha Life because that's a massive, like, Korean global entity. But some of the smaller teams that, like, would potentially be looking to an offer for a takeover would also be at threat of being relegated. So like at the end of the day, when you're doing your profit analysis and you're like, oh, do I want an Overwatch League spot forever or this forever, or this would be nice, and like I like their low park, but what about this promotion relegation? Like that's another kind of wrench into what is like League of Legends is like a reliable investment in every other region in terms of like, you know, you've got the spot forever, and it's not in Korea, and I'm sure that can't help for drawing international money.
What do you think about the failure of so many of the big orgs, this LCK split?
So, I mean, the Three Worlds team, obviously the most conspicuous ones that fell away. Um, I think, you know, I hear a lot of stuff, so I'm not looking to like leak or like betray any trust, but it feels like it's three kind of different stories. Like one of the big things that happened this off season was the support talent completely like dried up to two, and there was one everybody wanted in Mata,
Yeah.
and then Tucson was like I was hearing so many rumors about Tucson. Like I think at one point Tucson was going to Europe, and then literally every Korean team was like, "Oh shit, we have no support," and Tucson was like the hottest guy around because there was no one else when it comes to
Gorilla.
like even like a S tier, A tier, B tier. Yeah, Gorilla, you know, committed to Misfits at some point, and there was nobody, right? So I think a lot of teams got caught with that. So you look at the teams that are, you know, down the bottoms, KT, Afrika, Gen G. KT very clearly had, you know, a roster that was set for the top side, and then their 80 carry, like it was a kind of open secret. They were having tryouts very late in the piece, just trying to work out who the hell they were going to put bot lane. And that was very much like a roster construction problem, I think, on their side. Also, Smeb kind of falling off a cliff in personal performance. Like his performance was not anywhere near raid boss status in basically any game. Like we got one or two kind of peak Smeb games, maybe one peak Smeb game of like the 40 plus that he played. And that when you have like a kind of autofill bot lane and then Smeb not playing, like that's a real reason that they weren't anywhere near what you could expect. Afrika was very clearly leadership problems. And I don't mean that like the coaching staff. I mean, I can't speak to those, but I think specifically they had no shot callers on that lineup. The only player there with any experience was Spirit. And I spoke to him at Kesper Cup, and like it was very clear at Kesper Cup that like I was like, "Oh, how's it going?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just not playing very much. Like they really believe in Dread. They really want to play Dread." And I think it was very clear Afrika just wanted to play Dread. They're like, this guy's super aggressive. He's going to be the future. And then they realized that they let Kuro go very early. They decided that Kuro wasn't the future. I think after the C9 series, they were just like, all right, we're done with Kuro. And so they just didn't want to pay for him because they were like, okay, he couldn't hack it. Therefore, we don't need Kuro anymore. Like we're going to find a young mid laner like Yukal. And then Tucson left as well. And then Kramer left as well. And then there's just no experience there. And that was a team that just had no idea how to win. Like they just couldn't translate any advantages. They just didn't know what to do. Like they didn't have a shot caller. Their most experienced player most of the time was Keen, who'd played 1 year and like half a split. And he was, you know, very clearly not a talker. You know, he's just a young player who was really talented. So that was a fundamental problem. And the fact that they had those players and then let all of them go and then lost because of it, like I'm sure Kuro's like so happy with his decision, right?
Well,
to go.
Kuro is someone that's gonna fetch a high price due to how long he's been in Korea and like the kind of performance he's put up, right? Like below
Has a
Fago.
brand, played well in China, like he must be feeling really good now.
Yeah, so a lot of Korean teams felt kind of the same way about Kuro that Afrika did. Kuro is good, but he's not amazing, and he's not going to carry our team to the future. And
Like, literally pro players were telling me, like when people would message me, I'm like, what's Kuro up to? What's he doing? They're like, Korean teams think that he's done. Like that he's past his expiry. And like if you watch that C9 series, you know, where he plays the Kassadin into a pretty good Kassadin matchup and gets like obliterated, hits 100 CS like 70 minutes into the game. Like I'm a little bit of hyperbole, but not a lot. Like Afrika just made a call that they're like, you know, this guy has a brand and this guy, you know, would no doubt have been the best played paid player on that squad after Marin left. And they were just like, okay, well, we got this. No. And they did that about a lot of things. And then it was like, oh shit. Like now our team is just not able to win. Like we have Nofe, who's a good coach, right? Like, or at least has a winning history, but they just weren't able to play call. So it's kind of their own problem smacked them in the face, which is, I'm sure Kuro is smiling at the end of the day. And the final was Gen G. And that was what the hell happened there? They finished second in Kesper Cup, and you know that they looked at that and they were like, "We did it." Peanut played pretty good in this tournament. Our bot lane with Life as the only rookie in this team, Ruler will carry him. They must have felt like they had done it all. And for sure, like they had a really tight squad. They only had the 6, right? They only had Roach as a nominal top lane sub and no other subs. And I'm sitting there going like, all right, so who's your mid lane sub? Because Fly was never a starter since in Korea. Like on Gen G, he was the sub to Crown. He played a lot in that one split and then looked pretty good, but they didn't go with him at Worlds. And he's a player who historically has had an effective champion pool of like 4 at one meta. And like if you ban 3 of them, he's got 1 left kind of thing going on. And he could never really play the meta champions well. Like if it was an Orianna meta, he couldn't play Orianna. He would still play Aurelion Sol and Zilean, but those picks are good. But the like 3 like control mage normal champions, he was never very good at. And then so I was like, okay, so who's your mid lane sub? They didn't get a mid lane sub. They had the halo effect of finishing second in Casper Cup and then being immediately underprepared for like a very poor start and having no like extended bench, and who knows what was going on in terms of internals. But I think the halo effect really cost them. I think if they had a fuller squad, it would have been better. But their games, like, I know the MVP topic is going to come up at some point, Thorin, because I know you have a strong opinion on like LCK MVP and stuff. Like, Ruler like had one of the best splits ever on a team that was giving him nothing. Like Fly and Cuvee were like getting obliterated every game on every matchup. And Ruler was having a great split. And I've never seen a team that was like, both solo laners were just getting slammed. So I think they just ran out of confidence, like after a lot of losses. And, they're young people, right? Even if they played for a few years. And there were no more subs and there was no more chance. There's no time to breathe because it's a 18 best of 3 season. I think they just rolled over. And it was sad because Ruler was trying, but...
Dude, Gen G fucked up so hard in roster building. I feel like they wanted to be they didn't want to be a bottom focused team anymore. They felt like with Core JJ being primary shot caller, and just how the team is built, that they were going to be a bot oriented team if Core JJ stayed on the team. So they're like, okay, we want a new direction.
What is this roster then, Loco?
That's the problem that I have. They didn't want to be a bottom oriented team. They're like, we're going to let go of Core. And then we're not happy with Crown, but we think Fly can take over. Fly definitely has clear strength and clear weakness. He's a player I worked with before. He's very good on some of these champions, and he knows how to play priority well, but he's not going to be a mega carry for your team. And they stayed with Cube, where Cube looked okay last year. I thought he was one of
they got Roach at least, right? So at least they had competition. I'm not saying Roach. They had someone there for top.
And then Peanut was the weirdest pickup ever, where they made him the highest paid jungler, and they weren't going to play around Peanut, and they were just going to go back to being this bottom-oriented team. It was just so confusing, because if that was the direction you were going to go, if you're going to be a Peanut-oriented team, then give Peanut more freedom, play towards Peanut. Don't shove Peanut into being the kind of jungler you want for Ruler, and that's what they ended up doing. So, it was just terrible roster building. I love Gen G and I love what they do for their players, but I think that team was roster building failures. I think that team was direction failures. I think that team was a failure on like not the roster level, but the level above, where whoever is building that roster had no idea what they really wanted out of the team.
Some would say probably aren't great to your players when you surround them with shit players and don't give them a chance to ever succeed in their career. But, far be it from me to impose my standards upon you, Loco. You're welcome to keep saying that you love a team who, in the only actual thing that is their profession, are absolute rank failures.
There are like shitty management and shitty ownership that succeed briefly because they picked up the right players or they got lucky. But long term, I think teams like Gen G will learn and they'll have good management and they'll fix their problems. I have faith in Gen G to be good in the long term. It's just right now, like, it's a huge learning curve for them.
Yes. They're nice people. I like the Gen G people. I'm sure Loco does as well. But, you know, at some point, you just have to be like, how did it get to this? Like, it's kind of what I would say to them, like halfway
Probably
through
just
the season.
loads of people going around going, well, they're great people, so, you know, we'll give them another
But they finished second in Kesper Cup, though, and that's the thing, is like, that was the justification they've done it.
Kesper Cup's meaningless.
I agree. I can take that.
I think it's worse than that. It's worse than meaningless because
for them it was worse than meaningless. I agree.
If you look at the results of Kesper Cup every year, it actually gives misleading results because the team, like ESC ever won Kesper Cup. Like the teams that do well in Kesper Cup almost never are the best Korean team. KT Roaster won the cup when it was the year where they couldn't do anything in fucking LCK.
Here's what I'll say. The one that ESC ever won, like that was the worst timing ever because until this season, it was before the roster changes. So a lot of those teams, like CJN, just knew they were breaking up that split. Like they knew like Space and Mad Life wouldn't be playing together, blah, blah, blah. And they made final anyway somehow. And like they already knew it was all over. So like it was a very different thing there. This was the one after the roster changes, which I really supported. And it made it way more sexy because you're like, here's a preview show. Like, look at this hot new team. How are these players going to play? And everyone wants to know the answer to that. But the problem, I think, came in that, yes, that part was true, but every single team was at like a different gear in their development when that tournament happened. And some of them had scrimmed a lot, some of them hadn't. One side of the bracket ended up being way stronger, the side with Griffin on it. And obviously Griffin was still scrimming all the way through Worlds, people famously know. And so because so many teams had different motivations, Gen G just happened to get to the final playing pretty good League of Legends. Like they weren't, it's not like everyone capitulated next to them. They played pretty well on their side of the bracket. But you're right in that after the fact that they ended up finishing second ended up being a huge detriment to their development because they were like, this is an open and shut case, we're done. When in reality, they were like 3 subs short of getting a squad together.
Let's move on to something more recent. So one thing that me and Dorian actually had a huge discussion on was the finals, LCK finals, and how we viewed it. So when we had LS on the show, me, Dorian, and LS all predicted Griffin. And I talked to Korean players and Korean coaches right before the finals and then a little bit after the finals too. The overwhelming Korean like coach and player consensus was that SKT was going to win. I'm not sure what you predicted, but how do you feel about SKT versus Griffin going into finals?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to watch the broadcast.
I think you said on Twitter you were going to go SKT 3-2, but you hadn't like finalized your pick or something. Did you ever give a final pick before the final?
So it was Griffin 3-2 on Twitter. 3-2. It was Griffin 3-2 on air. I said it on air, so did LS. Okay. You know, we had Griffin 3-1.
I think 3-1.
We got in on the day, and we had the translated coaches' predictions. And all the coaches predicted 3-0 or 3-1 SKT. And I was sitting there being like, fuck, we've been hoodwinked. And we had been hoodwinked. So basically what happened was, speaking to players after the fact, Griffin were losing every scrim and SKT were winning every scrim. And all these teams were still scrimming them for whatever reason. And so behind closed doors, Griffin had kind of fallen apart. And that's why all the educated predictions were for SKT. So it's you know, when it comes to public sentiment, it's always going to be like a lose-lose. Like everyone predicted G2 to lose to potentially to Origin because Origin had played better recently. So the recency bias came in and actually it wasn't no G2 were good all along. And I've kind of lived through recency bias and also the recency being the truth, like through my kind of long tenure with the LCK. This is my 8th final. And so I tried to control for that and say, what is Griffin at their, at their core? What is the team that's going to be there in a final when they're not going to rely on gimmicks? They're a team that if I had to summate them, they're a team that the game reaches a certain point and their standard 5v5 team fighting is wordless communication, buzzword, amazing. They're just like an immaculate 5v5 team fighting team. the thing is, in scrims, they couldn't win at 5v5 team fighting. So they gave up on that and ended up going to Talia Pantheon. Like, I didn't hear that exact one-to-one, but they tried all their things, and what was working was Talia Pantheon. Like, so clearly they had lost confidence in the way that they had played previously, and clearly their last couple of weeks' performance was actually indicative. Because it's so easy to say, well, they beat SKT, they beat all the hard teams, they're basically guaranteed first with like multiple best of threes to play. Let's try stuff. It turns out it was actually, that was where, the Urgot patch came through. Some meta things happened that very clearly did, not benefit them. They were detriments, and they couldn't answer that. And they did fall away because of that. So who's to say what it would look like if they actually hadn't had those scrims, or discounted it, or if the preparation had been different? But the moment that I saw of the, 8 remaining coaches, 1 declined, 1 voted Griffin, and then it was 3-0 predictions for SKT. I went to Cloud Templar and Dongju, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And they're like, no, they don't know about scrims. They knew about scrims. So that was clearly what happened there. So that was just, Griffin just wasn't Griffin anymore. And then that's why I hate predictions. I'm really not a fan of predictions in League of Legends at all, because they have
Depends what the context is. If they're for fun, that's a great use for it.
And I agree. And like, they're very digestible. So you put up a prediction, every fan can interact with it. Like, they know what 3-0 one team winning is. So for that metric, they're really important. But like, people like my content because I'm like in-depth and informational. I spend fucking 2 hours, 40 minutes reviewing a 30-minute game. Like, I'm someone who goes on and on. And so, yes, it's a nice exercise to put down a number, but the number means nothing the moment picks and bans starts. And I'm like, well, I predicted Griffin versus SKT, and Griffin seem to think they can't team fight and that they're a cheese team. That's not really Griffin to me. So yes, they deserve to lose, because they should know that like for a year plus, they were sick team fighters, but apparently 2 weeks of scrims didn't work out. So fuck that, apparently. Like, so that's where I'm just like, okay, well, now my prediction is not informational.
Yeah, I mean, they lost absolute confidence in themselves, and they felt like they couldn't team fight SKT, where they played Talia Pantheon not just once, they played it twice, where they failed with it once, and they're like, even though we failed with it, and even though SKT is going to expect it, we still think we're going to have a better chance just running it over again instead of actually going into a proper
that game 3 was like, the moment they locked it in, I'm like,
it's done.
This is just like, there's no reason. And then if you watch the game, so Griffin loved to go for, on blue side, the grouped wave, the enemy bot lane's either level 1 or level 1 to 2 or level 2 to 3. And then, Tarzan's great with his pathing, and let's turret dive these 2 people and get a double kill. Get a kill, zone away the AD carry and get some turret plates, and they miss out on CS. They do that a lot. And with Talia Pantheon, it makes perfect sense, because the very obvious mechanic of Pantheon has a targeted stun, and then Talia has no problems hitting her skill shot. The jungler comes in like an Elise with CC as well. Like, bam, get a kill, get out.
Pantheon
a lot of ability
shots.
To box turret shots. Elise repels turret shots. Like, this is their bread and butter. Whether it's Talia Pantheon or not, they're very good at that turret dive.
Elise,
they do it. They did it in game 1. Yeah. They do it again in game 3, and like already you're like, the enemy bot lane just played against this, so they're like, well, this wave is being slow pushed, so we're going to get turret dive. That happened. And then Tarzan like left and came back again. And then he tried it like 6 times in game 3, when it was like the most obvious thing ever. Like, it was never going to work. And he's doing it again and again. So it's not just running, but he's running back the draft and then running back the gank when everyone in the game, even the top laners, call him when they're going to be turret dive bot lane. Like, it was so obvious, and that's
what he was trying to do. Was actually reach 88 miles per hour and then go back in time about like a month and a half, and then change his whole career because he just realized how badly it had gotten at that point in time.
So
I mean, that by that point it was farcical. Like, it was just farcical, unfortunately.
So Doran gave some criticism towards Tarzan for being one-dimensional, but how I felt throughout the whole thing was, why are you forcing Tarzan to play this way? Like, this is literally the only way he can play out the draft. Like, you drafted Talia Pantheon. This is a comp that's not going to function beyond a certain point in the game. You need to snowball, and you need to dive bottom. It was just so stupid. It's not like Tarzan was playing badly. I thought Tarzan played to his level. I thought Ford did better than I thought he was going to do. bot lane, it's hard to judge because they played Talia Pantheon, and for mid lane, Chobi had a good game 1, a god awful game 3, and a god awful game 2, and a bad game 3. So I was like, overall, Griffin still seems to be fine as a team. Why didn't they just go team fight? Like, why didn't they just play a normal comp? Like, that is still a huge question to me. I understand.
I'll give you a contrast point. So there's two teams that actually, unbeknownst to everyone until now, were in the same exact position. Team Liquid and Griffin both were far and away the best teams in their region. At the end, in the last few weeks, had a mini collapse. Both sets of fans blamed the same thing. Oh, you know, they're number one anyway. Or they just tried, like, for example, Team Liquid had a bunch of games where they put double lift on Vayne and then played like early games. They're just trying stuff out, you know, for the playoffs. This doesn't matter. You know, these are lower teams anyway. Who cares if you lose to Echo Fox, whoever it was they lost to? But then what happened was both had the same story in the playoffs. So the story with Team Liquid also was they were losing like 15 scrims in a row. The difference is, think about the two different cores of the teams. And Griffin, that 2-week span, killed all their confidence. It made them forget who they were, and they tried wild gimmicks in the final that seemingly, based on scrims, don't even look like they were going to work anyway. Like, it was almost like the sort of thing where it's like, I'll just try anything. Like, I don't even know if my analogy for what Griffin tried in that final is that's like a teenager buying, I mean, in America you call it Axe body spray. It's called Lynx in the UK, because the joke with Lynx or Axe, right, goes like this. You know, the commercials are always that it's like a guy, he sprays it on, and then all of a sudden women are just attracted to him. It's like the old pheromone myth from the back of the men's magazines. You go, buy this pheromone and women will have to. It's like, here's the thing, right? If you ask any teenager, they all know that doesn't really work. But the logic goes like this. If there's even a 0.01% that it adds, I mean, the other one's just a body spray, so why not buy the Axe, right? That's the logic, right? So it was the same thing. I don't believe Griffin actually thought what they did in the final was really going to work and win. I think they were so out of ideas, they were like, let's just try anything. Whereas you contrast that with Team Liquid also in a terrible position. By the logic of what happened in scrims, they should have abandoned everything. They should have tried the wildest, craziest cheeses in the fight. They didn't, though. They actually just went back, and what eventually won them that final was going back to their bread and butter of what had worked before, and actually saying, which is what I wish Griffin had done, is if you can actually beat me at my strengths, playing the way I want to play it, and with everything set up so what I want to do work, if you can beat me, then you have to just tip your hat at that point in time and say, well done, you win the finals. But if I don't even give myself a chance by playing to my identity, I'm going to lose because I've beat myself as well as you. It's like I'm giving you it's like I'm holding myself down while you beat me up.
And I'm with you. It's like a settled, like, veteran team at some point.
Yeah, that was the part I didn't mention, by the
right?
way. That was the contrast point I should have mentioned is, obviously, the Griffin players largely are fairly inexperienced still, whereas actually the thing that Team Liquid has going for it is everyone's a veteran in the squad.
And it's a who are we thing where it's, what is Griffin? Who is Griffin? Is now, like, on the LCK level, a 1-year kind of project. And if you include the Challenger split, they went, undefeated. It's like a year and a half. Like, I already told you what I thought. Team fighting team, very strong at the fundamentals. I honestly, like, my kind of recurring comment on Griffin was that they were overrated during the split. And I think people kind of understood some of that and didn't understand other parts. Like, Griffin started the season, like, super high octane, elite support, doing lots of crazy stuff. Tarzan picking off lots of different picks. And they were, like, very easily the hotness. And Griffin, for me now, I think of them as a team that was probably the best team in the world from, like, the day after World Final until the end of the first round robin. Like, they were probably the best team in the world then. But of course, that's not the time to peak, right? That's definitely the time to peak. Mostly off season. They were scrimming hardcore from after the LCK final all the way through, playing against IG and Fnatic. People know about all of that. They were clearly very good, but they didn't make Worlds, so those scrims didn't matter. They won Kesper Cup, which overall doesn't matter. And then the first round robin, they looked super excellent. But I actually didn't see that much from them casting their games past, like, week 2, excluding the SKT series that obviously was super great. Like, they were pretty unremarkable, playing very slow. They were no longer, like, they were aggressive at the start of the season, and they were just really passive team that just won because how could you beat this team at team fighting? Like, they weren't inspired for most of those wins. Crazy. It was very boilerplate. You're like, yeah, I mean, like, the enemy team tried, but, like, Griffin. But they weren't inspiring me. Like, I didn't see them playing like the aggressive teams in the LPL that were looking very impressive. And I beat the drum a lot. Like, the game needs to be aggressive ever since halfway through last like summer season onwards, and with tower plates especially. There's gold that's there at the start. If you don't take it by 40 minutes, gone. Fucking go get it. Play aggressive is kind of the way I think about it. And Griffin wasn't that, but they were just better. But then it comes to the final, and they like out of nowhere drop a fast strategy because Clear Pantheon's like, get the early gold. And we had the best possible TriCast for that because literally it was invented by LS. So, LS nervous, his first stadium cast, his first final. And it's like, it's literally like Griffin offered like him a gift. It's like, by the way, it's your comp. And so it's so obvious, like, LS, tell us all about this comp. All right, how does it win? What do we look for the winning? What timestamp? What items? When is it going to end? When does the game need to end? It was perfect for the cast, which was ultra great for us as casters. But it wasn't Griffin. Like, Griffin is a wait a while team. Griffin's a slow team that can play aggressive from time to time, but largely they were just hitting their marks, knowing when they were strong, and then going with that team fighting. They didn't play like that and lost. And so, it was really frustrating overall. Like the Griffin story, like now I kind of think of them like Kingzone Dragon X last year, where they made a final, a Worlds qualifier best of 5, and another final, and lost all of them. And if they go 10-0 in the regular season, the correct answer as an analyst, a rival fan, is big whoop. You're like, oh, cool. Call me when you win something. And like, that's so harsh on a young team. Like, I want to give them benefit of the doubt, but they were so good to a point that the fact that that point happened 3 times, now it's just like, is it just going to be the unfulfilled story? And it's really frustrating.
As a side topic, something that you just made me think of there was like the fact that, like, as you said, that they were still scrimming during Worlds, for example. Like, that's what people know. Like, that's obviously famously where Damwon got their hype, was scrimming the teams that were still in Worlds bracket. Well, that's actually one area that I feel like actually Korea is also way behind the West in, which admittedly in the West, it came from the opposite end of the hard work spectrum. But like, Koreans don't seem to understand the premise of peaking for a specific match, tournament, whatever. They think every day you put in 100% effort, you play at 100%, you scrim at 100%, you do everything correct. Like, that approach, you're not robots. Like, there's very few people are going to be able to survive that. Like, I know that's basically in StarCraft Brood War, that was basically what that system created. It was like an insane machine that just spat out people who were just burned out, wrecked, didn't make their potential. And then you had those rare mutants that could just survive that. Like, you had people like Flash who genuinely seemed to enjoy playing like 18 hours a day, sleeping 4 hours, getting up and doing it all again. Like, like endurance and stamina, and that's a 1v1 game. In a 1v1 game, you might find that guy and maybe he can withstand it. What are the odds all 5 of your players and your coaching staff can withstand that kind of schedule? So if you're going to start playing at the end of last year and you're still going to want to be the best in like April of this year, if you can do it, you're a legend. But that's going to be real tough for anyone.
I mean, I was talking to players recently, like, that played in the promotion tournament, that played in LCK. I'm like, oh, how's your break going?
You're cutting out.
Oh, wait, you cut out a second there. Say it again.
Oh, sorry about that. I was talking to players and saying like, oh, how's your break going? Whether they played in the promotion tournament or whether they played in the LCK, and oh yeah, it was a good 5 days. And I'm like, really? Like, the whole break is 5 days? But Koreans' work ethic, like Koreans, I'm talking about the nation, the pride in working hard and coming together to grow something is really, in the blood. Like, Koreans work really, really hard, and that's their default. So, that's why, of course, when Koreans go to America, there's always these issues. And you will always hear, like, if you poll 10 esports players of any esport after 1 week in NA, I guarantee all 10 would say, well, my teammates don't work very hard. Like, I'm doing what I do and everyone else is not working very hard, because that's just cultural expectations. They're totally different. Mm-hmm. And I think the best material to read on this is Bang. Bang had one of his like really long diaries or interviews was about how hard he had to work, and there's like, he talks about like the year they won everything is his like worst year because of how much he had to work and how much they had to do. Like, the Korean players in general don't have context, and everyone is enduring together. Like, the coaches, the players, etc., the subs are all in it together. So that's all they know is super hard work. And I guess if they were the first team that didn't do that and didn't get the results, then everyone, regardless of their knowledge of esports, like, would in the Korean community would come together and say, well, it's because they didn't work hard enough, because everyone works hard. So I agree with you. Like the burnout, like whenever I hear these things with people getting 5-day breaks after a split, still scrimming all the way. Like when I talked quite openly with Griffin last year, and they were talking about how, after they lost the final, lost the Worlds qualifier, how they were going to take a 2-week break and scrim. And I was like, what are we scrimming for in first week of October? Like last week of September, like what are we scrimming for here? You don't play a professional game, like a real professional game as in LCK, for like 4 months. Casper Cup's 2 months. Patches are going to come through. Like you're not even getting patch practice, but that's the way it is. And, until the results weren't there recently, it was hard for anyone to not stay in that practice bubble, because following the Korean way, won world championships.
Well,
now, if it doesn't win 2 in a row, then I think the pin will drop. But until it's for sure not the best way to go, I can't really argue with them still going that way, even if I step back and go, doesn't seem very healthy.
So in Korea, like the work ethic thing comes from, I feel like, mostly school and your parents. So in school, you have to work incredibly hard to stay on top and to go to good schools. Like even starting from middle school, there's elite middle schools you can get into, and definitely super elite high schools and really, really elite colleges you can get into due to how hard you work and what kind of grades you can get. And also grades are very public in Korea. Like you take a test and then the teacher hangs it up on the wall. Like they hang it up on the wall, and then from 1st to 30, it's all listed on the wall, and people know exactly what grade you got. So yeah, I mean, Korean school is rough, and I think that's where a lot of the expectation starts. And then from your parents also, your parents always telling you, like, you have to work this hard, like, you have to get good grades if you want a better future for yourself. So, like, Korean culture, when it comes to work ethic, I think is toxic. I don't think it's healthy. I think what's expected
I always say
Koreans
it's like a curse. It's like a gift and a curse, because the gift is obviously you might, especially when you aren't burned out, you're going to accomplish, in theory, your maximum potential. You're going to be able to go to sleep one day and go, oh, I don't ever have to worry. Could I have worked harder? Could I have done more? No, I did everything. But the curse part is that also means, in a mad way, you have to sort of ruin your own life. Like I always give this analogy. If you look at Western traditional sports, the NFL, NBA, there are players in those sports who also were like that, like Kobe Bryant, Jerry Rice. These are people who basically sacrificed everything in their life to be the best possible player they could be at their sport. But crucially, you notice that's just one player on their team. On their team, there was another guy, I'm sure, who was pretty good and he didn't develop all his talent. Or there was a guy who maybe he could never get his head in the game in the regular season. In the playoffs, he was activated, So the problem there is, in the West, it's actually a personal choice. It's up to you if you choose to go above and beyond. And that's the key thing. It would be considered going above and beyond. That's why you would be revered for doing more than you were expected. In Korea, it is literally expected. Like, if you are even the best team, like, I'll guarantee this Griffin team now, we're talking about the fact that they might have burned themselves out. I would guarantee you that the Korean perspective is like, they should have worked even harder. And in fact, as soon as they lost that final, they should be in the practice room tomorrow working if they want to win the next split.
Who is your Korean role model that wasn't super hard grind at all moments? Like, everyone obviously aspires to Faker, and he, obviously a very, very hard worker. I'm sure Faker and Kobe Bryant could have a very intelligible conversation about practice and things like that. But there is no role model that wasn't that. Like the pros that were known to not aspire towards those things, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think those were probably also the problem personalities that got pushed out. Like Insect, for example, didn't fit. Insect is the famous one who didn't fit into the Korean scene. I don't know about his work ethic, but if I found out after the fact that it was, okay, he didn't want to scrim 700 hours a day, and that was like the problem criteria, it wouldn't surprise me. So what is a problem personality in, say, in North America? Like someone who may have some of the emotional instability, the Dardoch, I guess, is the famous poster child from years past. Then in Korea, I'm sure the problem personality might just be the person who didn't want to scrim 8,000 hours.
Well, the topical example would be the guy who just retired, Prey, because people forget this guy would have had such a limited career if he hadn't have been brought back from the dead by the Rocks Tigers, basically. Like, if you remember, he was the guy where at the time, like the famous example I always give was when Madlife was in Space Prison, when he used to play with Space, but Madlife was still one of the best players. And at the time, CGO wasn't the number one team anymore. This is when SK Telecom and KT had taken over, but they were still just placed well enough. They were always a playoff team that, like, you know, they could have made the big move that brought them the one or two players that put you back to the top. So at the time, people who were Westerners, me, Monty, used to always say to the Koreans, why don't they just go and get Prey? Like, he hasn't played for a few splits now, you know. He's out there. He's a very talented player. And what everyone used to say was like, oh, he'll never play in the well, it wasn't LCK at the time. He'll never play in OGN again because he's got a girlfriend. Like, he's distracted. Like, you know, they just viewed him as like he was written off. And if you think about that in context, the majority of this guy's incredible career accomplishments came in the second stanza, in the time after that period when someone did take a chance on him. So I think that says it all right there. Like, someone who would have accomplished so many great things, that would have been cut short. He might have never been back in the scene.
You actually bring up a really interesting point because the only not like, so again, we don't have the role models, super hard workers, but actually the one small thing that has changed is there's more pro players in recent memory who publicly have a relationship. Like Ambition's wife was very well documented. Score was wearing a promise ring, which indicates that he's in a serious relationship. I know it's whatever. It's not for me. I'm just saying, like, he was wearing a visible indicator that fans talked about that he was in a relationship. And while this might sound farcical to some,
I'm pretty sure SKT's probably got Faker in a fucking chastity belt with like a $7 million key that you need to purchase to unlock it.
All I'm saying is that, like, let's say there were like 6 players who were like publicly known to have girlfriends who were on successful teams, that at least told people coming in that actually having a relationship is not like a career ender, like you're alluding to around the Prey situation. And while on the level of like multiple different styles of people coming together to be a winner, it's not there yet. But that is actually development for Korea, like showing that there can be a healthy relationship and play. Like that's like literally when in 2015, like Monty and I would hear like, oh, he's got a girlfriend problem. That's the reason why he's not playing well. And like, at least now you don't hear that anymore. Like, not everyone's in a healthy relationship or whatever, but it's not that one note like girlfriend bad, no girlfriend good, which is something.
And by the way, I do make that joke about Faker in the light of the knowledge that it is entirely possible that he was born just without any genitals at all, and he just comes forth like, listen, I'm here to send forth my skill shots, not my seed. Like, I'm here to show you the way how to become the League of Legends deity.
I don't know. Whatever he's sending out there, some of those plays are pretty sexual, Thorin. So I don't know. I enjoy them. He's a great player.
One thing.
Hey, everyone gets into something, Loco. I'm sure you got some dirty stuff you about.
No, I was very. I just focused on the game, and I hung out with my teammates.
I don't remember that from my conversations 5 years ago.
In the game, you were.
I yield. Let's stop.
Played very aggressively, but the problem is, in the game, you would often like make a mistaken judgment, and you'd leap in too early. Like, was there any? Where was that coming from?
I yield.
Right, okay, my bad. Just an aside. I just wondered, I thought was there any sort of correlation? I don't know. Maybe not. Some people are different.
One thing I want to say is I think there should be a lot more blame on Korean coaching staff. I think Korean coaching staff overall is pretty garbage. I think Korean coaching staff last year was...
Come to Korea and say that, Loco.
Come
to Korea and say that.
Whenever I'm next... Papa...
The hierarchical age problem, it's very hard to call out your coaches,
Yeah, I mean, impossible for me to do and impossible for a lot of people to do, but it is really like garbage for... I think Korean coaches, a lot of them are really garbage. I think last year there should have been like a serious wake-up call in terms of how the game should be played.
Right, normally, listen, Loco, normally I'm fine. Like, I obviously say players are shit all the time that aren't actually shit. That is hyperbole. They're just not very good players or as good as people make out, right? When you say garbage, like, give us a sense of where that is. Like, for example, give us context. Does that mean, for example, that the best coaches in the LPL are better than the LCK coaches? Are there coaches in the West that are as good? What do you mean in the context?
And who are we talking about when you say coach? Because Korea obviously has the most different types of coach, and sometimes you don't even know who is doing drafts. Like, sometimes they have a life coach, drafting coach. Sometimes they only have one coach. Sometimes the life coach is the only one.
Papa, give me one sec. Let me switch the region on the call, because
wait there one sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better, right? Yeah, go on, make your point.
Okay.
I'm saying Korea has like drafting coaches, life coaches, etc. There's a lot of different types of coach, and you have StarCraft personalities that come back and they're considered the coach. I think with Korea, it's so hard to know who to put the blame on. So for a lot of games, like Kingzone sometimes has Hirai as the in-game coach, the only person on a headset, and they sometimes have Acorn. And surely one of them has a skill set of being super in touch with the game, and one of them has a life coach kind of a skill set. And I don't really intelligently know, like, do all the teams have coaches with one kind of like, this is what a Korean coach is, like 3 criteria they all like? So I'm thinking probably no.
Okay, so mostly this is how Korean hierarchy works. There's head coach. This is 감독.
Hirai.
Head coach is, a lot of times you don't directly coach the game. You kind of coach the direction of the team. You punish players, and you're the middleman between the team and the front office. Because almost all Korean teams have like a front office or like a bigger company that they're reporting to. So you are more of a traditional sports head coach, where you actually you're not the most knowledgeable about the game, but you are definitely the oldest, and you are the one that's most responsible, and you're getting paid the most. So that's what a head coach is. And after that, they have just regular coaches. These are the ones that actually coach the game. These are the ones you work directly, that does pick and ban, that does like the reviews, that talks to you one-on-one about how you should be playing, what kind of mistakes you're making. This is like a coach. So Goma used to be a coach, and there used to be a head coach above him, and now Goma is the head coach, and then under him now there is Jeffa, there is Fly. I'm not going to call people out by name, but last year there was like a huge uproar afterwards, like privately within like the more like the smaller knit, like the Korean community in the know, like the other coaches, like the people that work in OGN, certain coaches not really working, and especially head coaches, and just going out and drinking and chilling and meeting with other head coaches and just spending their time be it, because they never had to work due to how good their players were and how much they grinded. And I think that's a huge reason Korea's direction going into Worlds was really bad, because they just kept reinforcing the same things that they knew before, and they felt like they would win anyways. Even after multiple lessons from MSI, from Asiana games, like they didn't learn. And I think this year there is still a lot of that. The thing you talked about, the early turret plating gold, and also lack of green smite and sightstone, League of Legends has fundamentally changed from the game it's been. I would say there is like the sightstone green smite era, and then now there is this new era of turret plating. So the way you have to view the game is completely different. The way you draft is completely different. The way you put on early pressure is completely different, and the way you prioritize early game leads and having control early game is different. And Korean teams didn't adapt. I think Korean players are incredibly smart and hardworking. I think the blame has to fall on the coaching staff. And
I think that's fair. Honestly, I think it's fair. It's why there were a lot of games where teams won, especially in summer last year. This is even before turret playing, but where the game, with green smite removed, the game had changed. And there were so many games where like Gen G would grind out a 50-minute win, where as a color caster, like, obviously I still have to be like, okay, you guys won, nice team fight. But even on broadcast, there's so many games you can go back to me saying very clearly, it's cool that you won, but this win doesn't beat better teams. It doesn't beat other regions. It doesn't make you more internationally competitive. You just won because you grounded out to 50 minutes. Like, you have to play to the new meta as the meta dictates. And Korean teams were still making only the 95% short play every time and ignoring all the more risky players that actually were correct based on the game state and the draft, etc. And informally, what you do here is that the coaches are saying, look for a safer choice, look for a safer choice, look for a safer choice. And it's something that needs to be updated. And I don't think Korea's completely there. It's why I'm down on Korea's chances as well at international tournaments going forward. I still think that Korea is small adaptations forward, but not wholesale adaptations forward to where they need to be.
It's very just old school minded. Like we are the best. We are the best esport region. We are the best esport team. We are the best esport country. Why do we need to adapt? And that's been true for such a long time, but it's not true anymore. And I still think Korea should be the best. I still think Korea should be the best region by far. I think SKT or whatever team Korea wants to field should be the best by far due to the amount of work put in and due to the infrastructure that's there. But it's not due to the direction. Like, the direction is fucking shit for so many of the teams. I think so many of the teams are just putting in worthless hours into practice due to what they feel like is the ideal League of Legends. We're not playing that game anymore, and that's not the way you should be practicing anymore, but so many teams are doing that.
I will say, just as a general point, like, I'll make this abstract for a second. That is actually very famously, if you ever follow Counter-Strike, basically what happens to great teams in Counter-Strike. Like, there's a very interesting phenomenon where whatever team is like the really dominant team, you know, a team that can win like 6 tournaments out of 10 that they played in and win a majors, all sorts of stuff. Those teams don't, like, when they're number one, they might be like unbeatable. They might be so far ahead of everyone, or they consistently beat all. So they're like a clear number one. Now, what's interesting is if you think in like a linear sense, like a lot of people do with the information that comes to them, you would think what would happen is, right, whoever beats them is going to be number two, and number two is going to beat them, and then number one's going to just swap spots, and then, you know, either they have a chance to go back up or they go down, and, you know, it goes that way. That is almost never the way it works. What happens is, it's actually, you have to look at it in the context of paradigms. What happens is the team who is number one consistently has nearly always either innovated something within the current paradigm of what becomes the meta. So they basically invent and are the pioneers of the meta. Sure. So it takes people time to catch up to them or counter that, or they got lucky and their personnel fits exactly the same thing, what they wanted to do. So whether they invented it, whether it just fit what they were doing, that happens. Well, what happens is the team that replaces them is nearly always the team that does the same thing further down the timeline. They now pioneer the new meta. They now build the counter to the previous meta, hence why everyone has to shift the meta game. And so what happens is you don't go from number one to number two. You typically go from number one to, say, like number 5. So even if you still have fantastic players, you have a big drop off. Now, this is the interesting part. When the teams drop down to number 5, they almost never go back to number 1 with that lineup. Because what happens is they don't see the game the way I just described it. They see the game on a day-to-day level. And what they think when they practice each day is they ascribe all their failures to like temporary things. They think, right, well, you're not playing very well, and we've let that map in our pool go. So this analogy for CS, for League of Legends, it would be like, oh, I'm just not that good on that champion anymore. I've got to practice that more. They use like very, very day-to-day things, and as a result, they almost never see the bigger picture. And it's only usually later on when they break rosters up and they make new teams, basically resetting everything, that those players ever have a chance to be number one again. And I feel like Korea as a region has done this. Like, they're still thinking, as Loco kind of implied by his analogy about criticism rather of the coaches, like, well, if we just fix things up how they were in the past, we can get back to number one again. You know, we should be number one. But if you look at the current way League of Legends is played, the game is almost primed for China to be the best right now. Like, is it any wonder China has like 6 teams that could all like battle to the death for the top spot?
And that's what I've tried to espouse and kind of shout at the top of my lungs is that for the longest time, even with like, you know, the season 4 weight award and the season 6 weight award were very different, but they followed the same logic. Like, at that time, you could have unlimited control awards that were invisible. And so you could light up everything and you always knew everything. And you could always make the informed play because you always knew everything. But then eventually, Green Smite, you had to be smarter with your wards, but you could still, like, the uptime on critical information was still overall very high for every League of Legends era until Green Smite was removed. And Riot made it so clear, because you'll remember we had one patch where Relic Shield junglers were a thing, where you could take the support item in the jungle, you ganked, you killed like a couple of cannon minions, and then you still had a sightstone from the jungle after the Green Smite era. That got nerfed very fast. They didn't want that in pro play either. Like, junglers were not to ward, was basically what was put out there. And that was the time onwards where I'm saying,
which is a pretty fundamental paradigm shift.
But it's also like, it's so clear, and it's like, it's Riot shouting, you will not have that vision. It is gone.
They don't only shout it, they post in the forums regarding
No, I
like
know.
the kind of League of Legends that they want played and the kind of League of Legends that they are pushing. Like Riot Blastoise, a friend of mine, and he's also like a Riot Insight person. He has clearly said this is the direction that Riot wants. Riot doesn't want control, slow, like late game 5v5 team fight League of Legends. They want comeback mechanics. They want exciting early game. They want pro play to be fun, and this is what they're pushing on us. And you can cry all day about, I don't like this meta, or like, no, things should go back to the way it was. Like, whatever. Like, I actually like this version of League of Legends better, and I think this is the version of League of Legends we are gonna get for such a long time. And this is exactly what Riot wants. Like how LPL is playing right now, how Europe is playing right now. I think Korea and NA overall are lagging behind. I think Korea and NA,
whether you like it or not, though, Loco, like this is the way it is, and they've removed every backdoor to make it the previous way. Like there were a lot of change. Like League of Legends has evolved as a game every year. Sometimes it's carry stops, sometimes tank stops, blah blah blah. But the fundamental thing that was always there was vision until it really publicly wasn't. Like it's gone. It's probably never coming back. They're not going to want to simulate that much level of vision. And that was so clear. And yet teams were still playing really, really slow in Korea. The stat that I've been talking about on my VOD reviews a lot recently, I incorporated on Cast, is Oracle's Elixir and other sites track combined kills per minute, which is blue and red teams' kills per minute on average for each team. So if Team Liquid plays per minute in their games, if you add Team Liquid plus enemy team, how many champions are dying each minute? So combined kills from both sides together. And for example, IG, in their game, every minute there's a kill. So if it goes 28 minutes, it's going to be 13 to 15. It's going to be 14, 14. There's going to be 28 kills or more in that game. IG averaged 1.04 kills per minute in the regular season in their games. The highest in Korea was 0.64 or something like that. 40% on average less people are dying in Korean games because people are playing very safe, because people are only playing around vision. And the reason why that's important is when vision is gone in League of Legends, it's replaced by item leads. So what happened is junglers get a kill because, you couldn't ward everything. And now they have a warrior enchant and you've got, half of a warrior enchant. They walk into your jungle and you look at their inventory and say, I can't fight you, and you leave. Now this jungler knows where you are and what's going on in your jungle, and his power is what's being wielded. You don't leave permanent vision, but when he invades, you control that area and you use that to take more. So you need the kills to get the items to be able to wield kind of like relative power vacuums.
And it's limited, right? You've got to parlay that into something. You can't just take that advantage like they used to and hold that through a 30-minute game.
You don't just have like a permanent golden gun where you just kill everyone. You're right. You have to be a lot more controlled about it. And that was last year. And that was like, okay, so battle warding like Peanut used to do, like that's the new meta. You're going to wield your power, go to an area with an item lead. They can't fight you. So while you don't have the control ward there to confirm it, they know they can't fight you. This year, they took it to the crazy level where it's in the early game, if you have that lead, there's free gold that like you're hitting a pinata, which is the turret, right? And gold's popping out of the pinata and you're like, yay, more gold. Just like when you hit a pinata, you're like, yay, more candy. And yet still, we're not seeing turret plates taken or aggression done. We're still seeing really long laning phases because it's not the controlled 90% play. Like the gold is only there till 14 minutes. Literally, they're taking the pinata home and you can't have it anymore if you wait. And yet still teams are not playing aggressive. And that's where you're like, at some point, like you were the leaders for a very long time. You still have fantastically talented players, but I think they just have to be hit on the head. Maybe it needs to be another international defeat where somebody at some point is going to, I guess everybody as a collective at some point is going to have to say, all right, our region isn't doing it right. And that's the heavy suspicion now because Riot is screaming early game and we're not seeing early game. So surely it has to be wrong.
So one other thing I want to add on regarding the vision thing is when new vision was introduced, when more vision artificially got introduced in the game due to Frostmancy, right? It's like, no, this is not how we want League of Legends to be played.
Sure.
Frostmancy is fucking garbage. We don't want there to be multiple people holding Sightstone-like items. We're going to get rid of this. And they were very, very heavy-handed about removing it from the game. Riot allows like OP things to exist in the game for quite a bit. Like when a champion is overplayed, when a champion is very strong, sometimes Riot will let it play up. But for the Frostmancy thing, Riot was very heavy-handed very quickly, and they did not want that to be an extended part of the meta.
So the only thing I'll say there is that the amount of vision it incorporated, I think, was actually it was relevant, but like the play style it promoted of like the reason why it was removed is there should never be a game state where two laners are running past minions, not last hitting them just to poke to get their gold. Like that's farcical. The game is like the reason why there being no deny mechanic in League of Legends wasn't as like kind of a game ender was because it evolved into zoning off of CS and things like that as kind of like a similar deny mechanic. But if both people are just not even, if CSing's not even an objective, we're just playing this really weird trade game, cashing in 60 gold on each other, like that's not League of Legends. That's not the game on any level they're trying to promote. The warding part was, again, you didn't want 5 side stuns on the map, but that was much more about if we're not fighting for minions, like what are we really fighting for is kind of like the, I think, core balance reason they nerfed that so fast. Because it's still there for duo lanes, right? We're seeing Clear Pantheon, we're seeing Sona Taric, Veigar Alistair's been played. I know that's been scrimmed by a lot of people, and it's still around. Because
why did you say you like it though, Loco? You said you like this the way the game is now.
Because the old game was very boring and not a lot of action, and sometimes it could be really hard to understand League of Legends from outside perspective looking in. Like, oh, this team is like losing turrets, but this team is keeping up in gold and they have the better late game comp and they're scaling and then they're going to get to a certain point and then they'll win. And for a lot of newer viewers, without the casters bluntly telling them that, it was very hard to understand why a certain team would win. Like, this team is winning, and then they suddenly start losing, which what happened was they got outscaled. And there's not a lot of action when there is so much wars, and then it's, I have vision here, it's hard for you to come in, so you have to avoid this spot, like you have to watch out for this choke point. The game becomes very slow and methodical, which some people might enjoy, and I would say the more like expert and the gatekeepy experts would be like, oh yeah, this is what League of Legends
He said, as he called it boring and implied that if there isn't action, it's not a good game. Yeah, definitely tell me about gatekeeping, Loco.
No, like gatekeeping as in like the old school.
You're doing it right now with the opinions.
What?
Do you not see that genuinely? You're doing the same thing they are, but the other way around. You're like, hey kids, I understand you guys, not like those old folks.
Sure, but I mean, like
macros a thing.
But Thorin, like, he's obviously referring to, like, you know, Monty's famous comments where he was like, the beautiful game is 0-0, but one team wins, right? And I am, you know, the evolution.
I would align myself with that.
And I would be like the someone you would assume would also be on that side. And to some degree, like, what was a beautiful League of Legends game before, like, I think should always be a product of where the game state is. And a beautiful League of Legends game when the wards were there was to some degree following that metric. Like, yes, there was the uninteractive parts, and I think Loco can, you know, say that, and like people want to see more kills. I get that, but to me, the beautiful game there was if we're abusing every mechanic in the game, you know, keep away from the fights, keep up the vision, know everything, win the game bloodlessly, win a nice team fight. Like, that was beautiful to some people. And I appreciate it for what it was, but I'm also a guy who rolls with the times. And when Riot decides that it's going to be different, the fact that there was ways to express the new game state, it didn't just turn into team deathmatch, everyone running at each other like some people thought. Like most LCK fans, when all the vision arguments came in, were thinking the game would just turn into like TDM and everyone running at each other. And why am I even bothering to watch this? It looks like bronze solo queue. But there is still a lot of skill expression in, I've got this item lead and I'm invading, and the enemy team has to judge, is he still there? Can we tell in some indirect way? What tells are there in the game? How quickly are they able to translate it into more objectives? Like, the game has changed. And that's, you know, people don't like change. They don't like when new casters come in. They don't like change in general. The game has changed. And so the people at the start of this change looked at most games and said, what a fucking fiesta. Like, Fiesta was really overused. And it's almost like as casters, we have to retrain and say, if you judge it based on the old Vision gameplay, yes, it looks like a Fiesta compared to those old games. But you can't play that way, because if you play the old way, you just lose anyway. You need to take advantage of aggressive moves. Aggressive is the new norm, not just warding and leaving it there. And that's the kind of weird phase we've come out of. And I think now people appreciating what it is and not what it's not.
Remember what Kojic says? Change is good.
Yeah.
That's what God said.
It definitely isn't, of course. That's probably one of the stupidest sentences ever written by a human. Like, change is good. Like, okay, in that case, go up to the guy who said that, hit him upside the head with a wrench, and then take all his money and go, what do you mean? You don't like change? Just change your financial and health state there. Of course, change as a ubiquitous comment could never be entirely positive, could it? Because everything's changing local. So everything isn't good, is it, you idiot? So anyway, there's two factors here. One, fuck that noise where they both tried to basically be like a shit version of Kazakhs as a human, where Papa was like, well, you know, I roll with the times. It's like, first of all, you don't have any choice, so that's a pretty irrelevant comment. But
Agreed.
Then Loco, like, it's just the way it is. Like, great. Well, in that case, Loco, go tell everyone in Iran, don't bother protesting, just the way it is. Just roll with the times.
That's all I'm saying.
Times, boys.
Oh my God.
No, that is literally the same principle of what you just said, you cretin. It just doesn't apply to the specifics of this case. Secondly, here's the more interesting point, which is this. I will give you a counterpoint there, which is I don't ever buy the argument that the problem with this argument is it's so SK Telecom centric, yet none of you have mentioned SK Telecom. Like, you talked as though all Korean teams did this. No, what happened was this. If you go to any other season of League of Legends, you can find a team that plays incredibly aggressive and is very good, and incredibly passive and is very good. So go to season 4. Samsung White and Samsung Blue are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Both incredibly strong teams. You go to past seasons where even when SK Telecom was the best team, season 5, season 6, who do you have in China? A bunch of amazing teams at very aggressive play, at lots of skirmishing, fighting early on. Some of them didn't always make worlds, like some of the teams that Doinby was on, but there was always teams that could do this. My point there is, in every other meta I'm aware of in League, there was actually a spectrum. It just looked like there wasn't, because usually the best Korean team did play the more defensive style or did play scaling and vision based. So as a result, it's true, the best team was the one who played that. But I would say that's getting the cart before the horse. That's because it was the best Korean team, and that was the best region and the best team, and therefore the de facto number one in the world. My problem now is this, is that if you look at the current state, I would agree with you. The best teams are actually the teams that are playing aggressive around solo lanes. They actually go for kills and fights constantly. And the problem is you have teams who can like Team Liquid can sort of do that, but they have better players than most players in their region. SK Telecom is the best Korean team and can just about do that. And as Papa alluded to, most people don't even have them as the favorite for MSI. So I actually personally don't like this meta because I feel like it goes too far towards not allowing the other aspect. Like, yeah, let's allow all aspects, but let's not cut off half the game.
Here's what I'll say. I agree. The soul of your argument, I think, has a lot of merit. But the thing to say is that you have to also remember that the Korean style, the risk-averse warding style that worked at basically every world championship until the last one, is also the one that maps to international tournaments and really high-pressure scenarios the best, because you're putting down the wards and they're making the mistake. So the aggressive team always existed.
Reactive play.
But if you play the aggressive style in a warding meta 10 times under pressure, you're more likely to make the mistakes because the onus is on you to act, and the wards existed that those actions would always be seen. So it's one of those things where, you know, international events are always going to be stressful. The safe way to play was also supported by the game very fundamentally. Now the safe way to play is not supported by the game in the same kind of way it was in the past. So the fun thing about this MSI and the fun thing about SKT as an example is SKT as an org, like, was actually, to me, kind of a garbage thing to talk about in terms of, like, SKT has always been this way this year, because this year was supposed to be the biggest difference, right? SKT is not, the soul of SKT is gone. Yes, Faker is there and he's the center of SKT, but Faker being there and Koma being now kind of like more removed as a coach compared to, say, Zephyr, who's their drafting coach, there's not Bang Wolf, Koma, Faker anymore. Like, SKT is new. In many ways. They're kind of a super team now, just like KT was 2 years ago. But the intriguing thing is that SKT, we've seen them beta test a lot of different what is SKT approaches to their gameplay since Casper Cup started to now. They tried to be a really aggressive early game team. They played around that, and they were looking really good in the early game. And then they would reach one game where their draft wasn't very good or their gameplay fell apart, and they'd actually be a little bit wishy-washy for a week, and then it almost felt like they were a new SKT and they'd try something different. So, like, the SKT we saw by the end of playoffs was, all right, you try your gimmicks over there. we're going to see it through and then we'll win because we went the standard way. And that does map to SKT season 6, season 5, season 3 when you're thinking back to it. Season 3 less so, they were more aggressive back then, but 5, 6 especially did fit that way, and 7 as well.
I think they just realized we have Teddy and Faker. Like, these guys are actually really great team fighters later on. And then when they were...
And you're right in that. But as Thorin's saying, yes, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, like, we got good team fighters, we can win team fights. But like Thorin's saying, the meta's actually screaming like, ooh, that's going to be hard. What about all the turret plays? What about the early game? And I think them actually going like, let's be an early game team. Ooh, we'll try the mid game, Elise comps. Okay, let's go to the late game. Has actually allowed them to try out all the different identities to be able to bridge pretty healthily in a new meta that doesn't just support, wait it out. So while, yes, I would say overall SKT are, let's, be competitive, but largely Azir kind of team fighting the late game is going to be the way they prefer to play. They've played enough early game, and they're actually good enough to play early and mid game, where they now understand those phases of the game in the confines of Season 9 meta good enough to get to the late game. Because you can't just play like SKT and go, yeah, let's choose those late game team fighting champions and win, and not just get steamrolled by early game. Like most teams, like IG is going to steamroll most teams that try to play late game scaling. Look at JDG in the final. They tried to play late game, and IG was like, excuse me, and just smashed them in the early game. SKT know the phase of the game well enough that they're not just a late game team. They're definitely not strongest in the early game. They definitely would prefer not a bloody style, but I give them a lot of points for taking Faker and lots of established players and being like, let's go on this like spiritual journey where there are weeks where we're like, SKT seem pretty bad. And then by the end, be way more than the sum of those experiences and have learned a lot. There's a lot of development clearly shown by SKT, and none more so in Faker and Clid versus Faker and Blank. Like Faker and Blank.
Blank was bad.
See, I have really strong opinions about Faker and Blank and Faker and Clid.
What's your opinion?
All I'll say is
let's go into that topic. Actually, let's do it as a side topic. Go on.
Faker and Blank played as if they weren't on speaking terms. Like they had no synergy. They didn't make plays together. You go back and look up this game. I don't remember the exact teams they're playing, but it's when Faker plays Rumble mid and Blank plays Kindred. And like that's a comp where Rumble mid, as you know, pretty off meta, as you would appreciate, Thorin. But from level 6 onwards, you have Equalizer, which lets you like hit a team fight. Like if you're farming in the mid lane, you can ult into, say, the Raptors. You can ult and like respond to things. Kindred's an invading jungler who wants to go in there and DPS people out and steal shit. That's what she's all about. So you would think that game would be Faker pushing the mid lane, Blank invading, and then Faker like rotating forward so they can like take the red buff and take the Raptors and get all the marks. Instead, there was multiple ganks where Blank would be invading on one side, like say invading enemy, let's just say Gromp for like a comical example, and Faker would be like taking his own team's Raptors. Like there was no coordination there. They weren't playing together. There was no plan to actually use the mid jungle to do something. And we've already established that you can't just farm it out and be fine later. Even around this time, you need to be like, making proactive moves with the power you have, and say a pick like Kindred versus a versus a tank jungler. But they didn't play those duos. There was no duo between Faker and Blank. And I think a lot of people reduced it to Blank's just bad. Why is he dying and invading on Kindred? And I'm sitting there being like, why the fuck are we playing Kindred if we're not going to invade? Like, this was just not the right draft for this team. Like, we're not getting anything out of this pick at all. Like, I'm not saying that on broadcast, 'cause I can't swear, right? But you get the point. This year, there was all those notable interviews where Clid said the most alpha thing I've ever seen an SKT jungler say. There's an interview at the start of the season where he's like, I'm not sure about how it's going to be like working with Faker because I need my mid laner to do certain things for me to play in my style. Like, could you ever imagine Blank saying that? Or Bengi? Or any SKT jungler? You could imagine Peanut saying it, but didn't ever say that. He actually said the alpha thing before the season started of, well, I'm going to play in my style and like, I hope Faker can back me up, which is an insane thing for a Korean to say, given the like power discrepancy, because Faker's the best player of all time and most Korean fans don't even know who Clid is until he played in LCK because they don't watch LPL. But he said that, And Faker clearly respected this guy because Faker and Clid are a huge weapon. They play together really, really well. Like the previous best duo for Faker was Faker and Bengi, because Bengi was the human ward at times, but in general he was, I'm going to go farm my camps and then I'm going to put down some wards. Like, yes, there were some areas where you could invade on Nunu, and you can point out the games where that wasn't true. I'm saying the soul of the duo was Bengi had enough mid pressure with either wards or camp that Faker could play his style until Bengi didn't need to be there anymore, and then Bengi go elsewhere and Faker would win the game for them. This season, when you do need mid-jungle synergy, because like we established, your jungler really replaced wards. Like your jungler is the wall, your jungler is the map control for a very large amount of the game. Faker and Clid are an awesome duo where Clid was the more runaway star of spring season than Faker was. Like Faker spent the first 7 weeks playing Lissandra Galio, backing up his jungler, who was the one who was winning all the MVPs. And it has changed. They've evolved through that. And now we get to playoffs where Faker was playing like more selfish champions, like a Nazir or something that's trying to actually farm for late rather than, well, I'm Lissandra, so I'm just going to rotate first anyway. And they could play that style as well. Like, that's a really big movement forward. Like, people will remember Blank as a bad jungler, but I really wanted to see Blank on another Korean team.
Yes.
And to see what it looked like. Like,
how do you pick this up a second? Exactly. That's why when Loco said that, where we didn't get into his full opinion, so you can give it in a minute, but he seemed very dismissive as though Blank's just a terrible player. I never understood that. Like, I get Westerners who only watch the big tournaments still think like, well, look, why are they subbing Bengi back in if Blank's good? It's like, in those SK Telecom teams, Blank did all the heavy lifting, and then what would happen was, yes, he was famously weak if you put him in the massive pressure game, or if he had to play a game that he just lost the previous game. Yes, he could definitely fall apart then and make bad players. So then they would bring in Bengi. Bengi knew exactly what he had to do in the game. He wasn't just playing as a normal jungler, and his job was just don't do what Blank would fuck up, basically, and they would win some of these series. But people, like, you've got to give this guy credit. This isn't like when they had Tom at the beginning of Season 5, and that guy was just getting wins on his resume because he was on SK Telecom. Blank still did some pretty solid work. There was times when he was a pretty good mechanical jungler even. Like, he could play picks Bengi could never have played. Like, I agree with you, Papa. Like, I know obviously Season 8 was so bad, everyone wants to wipe that SK Telecom out and basically just bring Faker.
But you don't want to edit this into, like, Blank for sure is a great player who's underappreciated, because we don't. The worst thing is, though, Thorn, we don't know how good Blank is.
That's
because
my point.
I think he was like, he had some good games, he had some bad games, he had some plus points, he had some negatives. But by the end of Season 8, his PR was so shot, it was very hard to give him another chance. And you could understand why he's now on the sidelines and might not get another look in. So it's almost worse for me that I can't even tell you how good or bad Blank is. I can point to all the bad games. I can point to where he made solo mistakes. I'm not saying he's like a rough diamond best player ever, but I just wanted to academically see him in a different environment, because to me, it kind of reminded me of the Pobelta situation, where Pobelta was really good domestically, would go internationally, and then be put on Malzahar champions. And everyone is rehashing the same point of, well, he can only play these picks. You can only do this. You're this. You're in this tiny box, and that's all the sum of your existence is. And yes, some bad performances would definitely push you towards something, but these young people, like, you know, I'm a school counselor, like, I've been around the block. Like, the moment you're told by everyone that you're this only, this is all you can be, you're my ward, you're Malzahar only, eventually you believe it, and you're like, I'm a Malzahar only. Like, you forget that you played a billion other games where you were able to carry, and you're only the sum of this one little box that people tell you are. And until you get to, like, breathe, you know, like, able to get out of the water and breathe, like, it's possible that you'll never be that again, because you're so, like, battle worn that that's all you can ever be. And I think that's a shame. There's a reason that some people have, like, got way out of an environment and then thrived. I think of Ambition as a jungler in 2015 summer on CJ. It was, yes, his first year as a role swap, but by the end, like, he was going on solo invade missions and no one was backing him up, and I was like, okay, well, this is over. And then Samsung picked him up, and I was like, that seems like a waste of money. And then he went on to have a career renaissance and ended up a world champion mostly because to me, he moved to Samsung, who at the time, most people won't know, when he joined Samsung in 2016 spring, like the roster around him had limited competitive experience. They were either rookies or no hopers, or they'd been on the Samsung roster that only had finished like 2015 onwards, because obviously 2014 all those players left, and they were like, oh shit, it's Ambition, LCK champion, older player. I'm going to listen to him. And then people backed him up, and he was a very powerful piece of a team for at least 2 years. I mean, last year wasn't great, but for these 2 years, he ended with the World Championship. So I guess, yeah, I think in League we do get these scenarios where people are too pushed into like one big group think on all of what someone is and isn't. And sometimes it's right on the money, and sometimes I feel like I didn't get enough information to know for sure.
Okay. So my thing on Blank is Blank and Faker are some of the fastest players that I know. By fast players, what I mean is they play incredibly fast in terms of checking the map and how much they click. This is LS's ideal players, Blank and Faker. I got a chance to watch Blank and Faker play like from behind them during the Worlds they barely won versus Samsung. Which one was that one?
2016.
2016. So it was when I was it was when I was working with ESPN to do a desk, and I also got very good tickets. So I was sitting very closely behind them, and I could see them play, and they play so fast. So when we talk about Blank and Faker having bad synergy, it's incredibly worrying for me because both players are players that always check up on what the other player is doing without even talking. So the fact that they have bad synergy means like their communication must have been so shot, and they just don't talk to each other, or they tried working together and they hate each other so much that they aren't willing to work together. And that's where I have a lot of criticism towards Blank, because if you are a jungler that can gather information by yourself, you play so fast, you see what's around the map, and you solo invade by yourself a lot of the times, and you get yourself killed, then there is a serious problem there. And a little bit on the Clit and the Blank situation, this year, you have to be more caring about the jungle, and jungle has to lead you. Junglers having early game leads right now means so much due to scuttle, due to tempo, being able to back first for your smite item and then go onto the enemy side of the map. It's very important to enable your junglers early, more so than it is to enable your laners early. Like laners should help junglers earlier parts of the game. And so in this meta, I think it makes perfect sense where Faker should be helping Clid much as possible, and Clid should be the alpha. But back then, I thought laners mattered so much more, and making sure the laners were ahead meant so much more, and Blank should have been more supportive of Faker, more supportive of other pieces around him. I understand Untara and Bang and Wolf were weak laners, and it was literally only Faker you could play towards. But if you had terrible synergy with the best player in the world, who has good synergy with pretty much every other jungler he worked with, Tom, Bengi, and then in the future Clid, then you clearly are the outlier. You clearly are the problem. That's how I view Blank, and that's why I think Blank was problematic for SKT. He wanted to be aggressive with losing lanes, and he didn't play towards and have good synergy with one lane that is one of the best in the world.
I mean, I think that's a very fair point, in that the meta right now like does whack you on the head with like, if you're not back your jungler, like it's actually a mistake, compared to before there was, again, a more lane-centric game. But I think that's a really good counterpoint, Loco, so shout out to you on that one. I still think, like, it's not like he was trying to play Kindred every game. Like, that's just one example. But in general, they couldn't play a lot of different mid-jungle styles. Like, there was a lot of styles that didn't work for SKT in the past, and that there was a big desync there. And I just don't feel like I can scientifically assign all the blame to one person or the other. But all the blame would inevitably go to Blank, because one of those two people is, the most popular and most famous player in the world. I think the system and the coaching around it, the fact that those problems with Blank and Faker were still evident, like 5-6 splits together, was, I think, a pretty significant kind of structural thing. But a big shout out to this year, where, again, we're mostly referencing the this year stuff. Like, SKT have learned a lot and have come a really long way. And to me, it's just, I'm taken aback by how good Faker and Clid are as a duo, because I didn't think, I couldn't have expected that they would, like, Faker would start the season selfless and then now grow back into more kind of taking more resources for himself judiciously. Like, they're clearly on, like, their development, I think, is there for people to watch. If you went back and watched all the games, you can see kind of this really impressive development, and the end result is something that I just treat to watch.
Right, if we talk now a bit about MSI, and obviously we're not going to go like specific, like the groups and all that stuff, because it's not yet. Go on then.
Dorian, do you want to touch on LCS first? Do you want to lead on that topic, and then we finish?
How long's this episode going to fucking be?
If we have time,
Not PapaSmithy on it, baby. You got a clear schedule.
I would love to touch
Call
LCS.
this episode "Fucking Papa Don't Preach" then, because I actually want to maybe get like 2.5 hours showing, reasonable one. LCS as well.
Yeah, a little bit of just the final, just
okay.
finals, and then we'll lead into MSI.
Okay. So, what did you think of the final of LCS, Papa?
I mean, I reviewed it yesterday. I actually did. I wasn't unspoiled, but I'd only like watched game one and then read the overall result. I think a lot of people had contrasting opinions coming out of that series. There was the argument of like TSM's the better team from it, and people came out disappointed from Liquid, and other people were kind of enthused by Liquid. I think it was, the most interesting final, right? Because it wasn't a 3-0 stomp, so that at least was something to take away from it. I actually, my kind of big thought coming out of it was that I think Team Liquid went up in my estimation from where I was at with Team Liquid, because I actually, coming into playoffs, there were 3 teams that had pretty much the same story, like TL, G2, and Griffin, of like dominant, and then like what's going on the last 2 weeks doesn't mean something, does it not? And my prediction was that 2 out of those 3 teams would be the real deal, and 1 of them wouldn't. And if you pushed me, I would have said that TL was going to be the team that would fall away the most, because I thought they just kind of had fundamental shortcomings that I was seeing in like VOD reviewing their games at the end of regular season, where I was like, okay, like I thought they could lose to FlyQuest. Like I thought that was a very possible thing. So I watched FlyQuest. I'm like, okay, this team's not bad. I like the way FlyQuest beat TL. They seem like a solid team. And I saw some like the thought exercise I did was I wrote out a Google Doc where I wrote down like things I was looking for from Liquid this series. And I polled the Twitch chat, and I'm like, what are some like markers we're looking at? Because, we're reviewing a series 2 weeks after it happened. We want to learn something from this series. We want to learn TL thoughts coming into MSI as a pretty good like outcome from reviewing this series 2 weeks after the fact. Like what things are we looking for? And there was certain things I needed to see from TL to kind of be able to amplify my opinion on them as a team. Because I thought TSM was the team at the end of the regular season that had most of the strings to their bow and should have been the strongest representative from NA. They rolled FlyQuest, and that's, that says something but doesn't tell you everything, because it's C9, TSM, TL is that top bracket. But I thought TL in general, like they lost game one due to counter picks where Broken Blade went Vlad and went massively. And that's definitely a way you can lose as TL, because Impact's mostly going to role play, and counter picking him, taking a carry, doing better in lane maybe than you should, because Impact might not apply pressure, and then outscaling. Very real win condition against TL. So you see that and you're like, okay, not the best sign for TL. Then they lose to Sona Tarek, and I'm like, look, they tried something against Sona Tarek. It's an off-meta thing. They clearly had some sort of prep that thought it could beat it. They couldn't beat it. So they lost the cheese strategy. So if you want to discount the cheese strategy, from my like expectations of how they'll do at MSI, they lost game one, and I'm like, okay, that's not how I want them to lose a game, getting counterpicked. How will they adapt? And remember, they've never actually had to adapt in a series until this final, because it's been best of ones all season, and then they won 3-0 against FlyQuest. So I'm watching game 3, 4, and 5, the games I know they win, and saying, do they adapt, and do they do things, or do they just like beat a defenseless team, and then now I don't have any opinion on them? I really liked what they did in game 3, where they said, okay, we're on the same side as we were in game 1 when we were counterpick, we're blue side. Let's elevate our top lane pick to first round, which was Gangplank, who has a global that can like gank bot lane with the ultimate. And let's draw out the enemy counterpick if it's going to be Vlad, or double ban top laners, and not just make the game Impact takes his pick in the second round on blue side, and then Broken Blade counterpicks it and wins the game with his counter pick. And just doing that, elevating it up to the first round, and also a pick that lets them gank bot better. And of course, Team Liquid want to get double lift ahead. That's how they usually play. I'm like, okay, we've done something. We've adapted. We're not just going to get fifth pick counter picked by top lane and lose to that. I'm like, okay, cool. And they're able to win the game through that. And I'm like, all right, thumbs up. I learned something. That's good to see. Game number 4, they play a fast draft with Zillion, and they just blow them open. And I'm like, wow, okay, Team Liquid, that's cool to see. Like, that was also a pretty good draft. I'm learning something. They won on blue and red side, and they did different things, and they're trying different things. Again, that's amplifying. And if you just take a step back and see some of the TSM players who are playing in their first final noticeably like, start to get reverse swept and start to, make mistakes. And then even an experienced player like Sven makes a big mistake. You look at TL and you're like, okay, they went down 2 games, one of them to cheese, one of them to just a legit counterpick. And then they've adjusted their draft. They've shown strong mental and being able to get through a reverse sweep. They've done enough things. I came away actually being like, no, I want to see Team Liquid go to MSI now. And I think that TSM might be the better team by Worlds with another split for like the full 5-man roster to come together and work out the kinks and fully integrate how they want to play. But I think TL right now is at a higher consistent level. And for an international tournament with the double round robin group stage, I think TL will show better performance at this tournament. So I come away being like, all right, Team Liquid, is your cap going to be world champions? Probably not. And look, if we're being real, TSM probably not either. But I think TSM have more room to grow. I think TL is like 90% of what they could be already. And I'll take the 90% going to MSI and representing NA. I think they're going to represent them reliably. They're going to be better than TL was a year ago. I think they're going to lose the teams that are clearly better than them. But there's no chance they come away like boom 0-5, then suddenly 0-10. Like it's not going to be a repeat of Team Liquid last year. They're going to wave the flag and you're like, well, you guys tried really some good games and you weren't the best team there, but we didn't think you'd be the best team there. And I think that's what you want from your representative right now, because TSM isn't ready to be this next level team yet. That's my very long-winded takeaway.
That was a very long-winded takeaway. Duncan, do you want to
start? That's what I'm all about, baby.
I definitely don't agree with his whole take on like TSM have like, they're going to improve and like by Worlds they can be better. Like that is just literally like, oh, see this one really good bird I have in my hand. I'd rather have those 2 in that bush though, because 2 is better than 1. It's like, no, if anything, that's like, what's weird about that is that shows how people can take different information and do the opposite thing with it. Because the problem here, Papa, is it's not like Team Liquid's lineup has been the exact same for 4 years and they're just this finished product and it's the end result of this development path. They all started on whatever day they all got their lineups at the beginning of this year. Everyone started at 0, Papa. This file lineup had never played together for Team Liquid.
Sure.
TSM's lineup had never played together. Yeah, they had cores that were remaining from the previous year. So here's what I would say. I go the other way on that. Okay. Team Liquid has shown me incredible peak early. They overcame adversity. They adapted, as you said. I actually think the most underrated coach in the entire West is Kane, because people didn't even consider him for coach of the split. They acted like, oh, the players just won this. Steve just bought all the best players and they just played the game and won. It's like, I can't even believe people who've watched like 8 years of League of Legends think that way. Like that you just put 5 players in a server and they just win the game. Like that hasn't worked almost ever in League of Legends history. Go ask Katie Rolster from the last couple of years if that works. Like that doesn't. So first of all, people overlooked the development of TL. They made out like they were this one-dimensional team from day one till the end. Meanwhile, TSM somehow simultaneously get to benefit from being like, but look how much better they were from the first weeks, winning almost every game towards the end of the split. And at the end of that, after an insane streak of like mostly wins, the occasional drop game, even beating a Cloud9 that on paper they weren't supposed to beat. They get to the final, they're playing a team they're also an underdog against, Team Liquid. They almost win the game against them. After all of that at the end, you're like, still a lot of potential there, they could still improve. I'm like, what? That's the other way for me. They already expanded a lot. They went, for me, above and beyond what I thought. I actually give them a lot of props. I think they overperformed somehow. And if I look at the roster, listen, it'd be nice if everyone in the world could improve, but I would bet against that. I would say next season Cloud9's better, or next season Team Liquid, the meta's different and maybe it favors them more. So I guess I just take a different perspective on that.
Here's why I take my perspective, like kind of like diving into the weeds and seeing what I see to say that. It's not to just like curry favor from TSM fans. I'm not trying to be positive. Like I'm happy to shit on bad teams. The reason why I say it is because you look at Team Liquid and the players they have and the styles they can play with the players they have, and there's some styles that just aren't going to work. Like, Impact is not suddenly going to boss people on carries. It just won't happen. Like, he can play his champions. He can add to his champion pool. He's got his, like, singed if it becomes a tank meta, which is his unique thing, but he will never be Broken Blade. And I look at Broken Blade and them trying to integrate Broken Blade, like Broken Blade coming into, like, a big region for the first time, starting off with some, boneheaded solo queue level plays in the first couple of weeks, trying to work out, who he is as a player, and some degree who he is like suddenly like a big personality because he's on TSM and has a big kind of social imprint now. And then by the end, Broken Blade's level of play is like awesome, right? He's like fucking amazing in this final. He plays really, really well in this final, and they don't win it. And there's games where like game 5, where he has a Gunblade at 12 minutes, killing in a 1v2, popping off on Akali, and you're like, holy shit, Broken Blade's going to just win this game alone. And then around that 12-minute Gunblade, they don't take bot lane out of to 25 minutes because no one tries to transfer his lead with a teleport bot lane. They don't really know what to do with his top lane lead that he has. Like they've got this like, rough diamond for the region, especially level of top laner. And they're sort of working out what to do with him. And his level of play is like, he's puffing out his chest to becoming a really good player. Like this guy will be a super good top lane. Like I have a lot of time for him. And that's the style they can play. They can play Broken Blade's going to 1v9. And Impact's not going to 1v9. And so I think they're getting maximum level impact. If Impact performs at the level that he usually does at an international event, that's fine. But I think TL can't play Impact carry style, but TSM can. But TSM haven't fully worked out what that means and how to win with that. But another split in, I'm very confident that they'll get reliably more out of Broken Blade. Bjergsen's Bjergsen. The bot lane is they got the worst out of Sven in game 5, but theoretically the bot lane will perform. And because I say, okay, Arcadian's first final, Broken Blade's first final, and Broken Blade's first split, I think they can work out how to use that piece better come summer. And I don't think TL has any new lever to like get more out of. They can polish what they have a little bit, but I think that TSM can get more out of what they already have. And that's why I think they outscale in the long term.
Where was that Bjergsen guy in that final? I thought he was a lot of people's MVP.
I mean, he had a really good semi in the final. I mean, him and Jensen was like a very uninteresting matchup in the final.
Whoa, wait,
kind of
Papa.
I think they just kind of grinded each other into the
ground.
No.
Basically. I want to challenge you on that. I think
I'm listening.
Bjergsen had way more tools to be able to beat Jensen, and the fact that they did nothing and nothing was happening mid lane speaks so much more of Jensen's skills.
Sure.
Like Bjergsen
I'm just saying not much happened around those. I agree.
You're cutting out again.
Bjergsen had more tools. I said Bjergsen had more tools for sure. And yes, the fact that it was largely negated is compliments to Jensen. But like I think that doesn't mean that Bjergsen's it's a negative reflection on Bjergsen, but he's still a player that will perform in the future.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be glass half full to be glass half full. Hooray, PapaSmithy is the nicest guy. TSM subreddit's going to say nice things about him. I just look at it closely and say the Broken Blade should be a big thing in summer. And if he's not, I'm going to be the first guy to say that the promise is unfulfilled.
What about Sven and Arcadian? Those are the two question marks for TSM going into the future.
I mean, Arcadian's is gonna never be like a world beater, but I think he can continue to like slowly grow, like kind of like Impact in top lane, Arcadian in jungle. The Sven one, I want to give Sven the benefit of the doubt, but I can't know. I can't know because he was with Mithy for the longest time. This season has overall been good. Season has overall been good. He makes the critical error, and I want to, knowing him, and I've met him, I've spoken to him in person. He's a very balanced person. He has a very good look at the game. He's a very mature guy. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but just like Griffin, where some people are harsh and say, okay, it was a rookie split. No one would be harsh to say, like with Sven, like this is kind of your last chance when it comes to a big series to have like that level of brain fade. Like he gets one more is kind of what I'm looking at with Sven, and like you're saying, maybe that's me giving him too much credit from knowing him personally and meeting him, but he's shown, to me, he's got enough runs on the board that I don't want to think of him as a reason they lose in the future just because he made two of the worst plays I've seen in a long time in the final.
Thorin, your final thoughts, and let's move on to MSI.
I mean, I basically said a similar thing to Papa on the last one. Like, I actually think that the problem I had with Sven is I never had the control group. Like, I never had him without Mithy. So if you come up as an AD carry with Mithy, well, a lot of people have done that. There's been a lot of very good players who've shown amazing AD carry play when playing with Mithy. In fact, it's going on right now in Europe with Patrick, where he plays at OG. So my problem there is, like, of those two players, I considered Mithy the greater player personally and had more of an impact on his team. So I don't write Sven off entirely. I still think he's a good player. My problem is I do think his time on TSM is limited because of the circumstances that he is an import. And so as a result, you can't just be a good LCS player. If you're an import, and especially an import for TSM, you need to be one of the best players in the LCS. So that's my problem is, like, I think the level he showed so far was all right. But being as they have a couple of other problems elsewhere on the map, I think if he doesn't have a really strong split now, if I were them, I'd remove him. I'd get someone else at that point.
Yeah, including the caveat of imported player. Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Duncan, do you want to kind of open us up for MSI?
There's two other topics we can do here, right? But I can't spend like 40 minutes on this. I have other things to do, like other shows, for example. So
it's 4:20 a.m. So yeah, I'm with you.
Here's the two topics, right? So we'll do MSI, but that actually shouldn't be an incredibly long topic because I'm not going to break down every team. We'll contrast like SK Telecom and the other teams. And then the other aspect, since Papa alluded to it earlier, is we'll briefly have a discussion about like MVP voting because this is actually a topic that we have like very contrasting opinions on. So in terms of MSI, okay, so now that the teams are known who they are, for me, I'm more interested to know things like, for example, specific team destinies, not like let's match up all 5 big teams with each other and do every variation, because some of those are just going to be almost pointless speculation. Like, how the fuck can anyone really test how like IG would do against Team Liquid? There's not even any basic information to give you a chance for that. So let's do, for a start off, SK Telecom. So the context, obviously, for every other MSI is the number 1 team in Korea is always considered the de facto world number 1. And the only way any other team, including a Chinese team, can take that is you have to beat the world number 1 at the MSI. And that's what lets you, as you saw with RNG, potentially become the number 1 team in the world. So what are expectations, Papa, for SK Telecom at this tournament in this meta?
I think this is the sort of thing that applies to the SKT brand historically. So I want to say new things about them, but I think that some of those tropes will be true here. I think they'll be slow starters. I think they've still shown they have this inability to be on top of a new meta very quickly. So the fact that we have 2 patch changes coming in to moving to 9.8, I don't think they're gonna be hitting the ground running fast with new strategies. I think they're gonna build up during the best of 1 phase. I don't think we'll see the best of them there, but I expect them to come in basically kind of a product of their playoffs, where they played 6 games of working out what the enemy's doing, playing something very evidence-based on their side and just trying to like last through it in kind of indomitable fashion. I think they're going to come in playing pretty slow, and I give them full confidence that they can adapt to a tournament meta if it proves to be a faster meta, but I think they're going to come in playing pretty slow. And I think teams like G2 and G2 with Mickey and IG have a really good chance of upsetting them in the best of 1 phase, especially in the first round robin. I think SKT will lose 2 to 3 games in the first round robin, but then I think they'll build into it and adapt to the tournament really well. And I think that to me, SKT and IG come in with my expectations of how they'll play, not knowing fully how much the tank buffs to top lane or how much the meta will evolve or what the scrim meta will be, because we already established from Griffin's woes that recent scrim meta is always going to be relevant even in an international tournament. I think they'll definitely come in playing a noticeably different style to the kill a minute action we're going to expect from G2 and IG, and it's going to be fascinating to see those teams compete, because SKT have no team to practice on stage games that plays like G2 or IG. There is no team that is super bloody in Korea. Even the ones you think of as aggressive have that combined kills per minute stat we're talking about around the 0.6, 0.5 when IG plays at 1 kill a minute. Like, there's no team to... And yes, they do scrim against IG, but scrims to stage are very different. So I'm very interested to see SKT's evolution, and I'm very confident in where it could get to. I need clarification on the meta to know what top lane champions will be. Like, I'm very confident the Shy is going to be playing carries, and Khan obviously is a carry player as well. But The Shy had a way stronger split, and Khan is, up and down in terms of performance, and international events play into some of his kind of nerve issues that he's had in the past. So given all of that, like there's definitely clear ways you can play against SKT and best of ones. But I think come best of fives, like if they don't make the finals, it's a huge underperformance from them. They have a lot to draw on.
What do you think, Loco?
Well, I think IG is the favorites going into the tournament, not SKT.
Agreed.
Due to the meta,
Yeah.
So, I was surprised because you said...
We were just talking about SKT.
Yeah.
But if you're asking this, if the question is who are the favorites,
You cut out again at the end, sorry.
I was saying if the question is who are the favorites, rather than just what are my opinions on SKT, for sure the overall favorite for IG.
Okay, because you said IG would upset SKT, so I thought you meant the other way around, but it's good to know that we both mean IG as the favorite. So I think IG are the favorites by far, and SKT, the longer they go in the tournament, I do think they are the team that's going to level up the most. The big question for me is, who's number 2? Is it G2 or SKT? So there's a lot of things going into it. And I think the biggest questions that we have to ask is, number 1, is Mickey X going to be playing? And if Mickey X is the one playing, is his wrist going to be fine? And is he going to get ample practice? I think that's the biggest question going into MSI for G2. How much practice, and is Mickey X going to play? And
well, I can actually answer that for you. Like, that's not even a question that's a real question. Like, he's definitely not going to have a fine wrist by then, and he's definitely not going to have had enough practice. So the real question, look, is just will he play? Now, if he plays, maybe they can have some of the form in Europe, but otherwise they will use Promiscu. So, like his injury isn't going to be healed by then, by the way. And if you look at some of the comments coming out of their camp, it's pretty obvious that it's like, it's one of those scenarios where you're trying to survive the situation. You're not ever going to have a great time from it.
so,
And given that information, just before you go, Loco, my read on that is, like, they were very open during the LEC final broadcast, talking about, like, he's playing maximum 2 games a day, 2 scrims a day, 2 matches a day, right? So my read on that is G2 play kind of like IG, just like TL play kind of like SKT in terms of, like, speed of the game, just like the regions are slower versus faster. Given that information of he's not going to have played as many games in practice, my read is they're going to have certain strategies that they're for sure confident on that they can play with Mickey, and they're going to have, like, smaller pools of those strategies, whether it's champs or champ compositions or, like, Mickey's the funnel guy or whatever. They're going to have some strats they can run with Mickey, and I think those are the strats they're going to be most confident on because they're most confident on him as a player. So my read is they play those in the best of ones. Those win them games in best of ones, but if they start losing games and they need to adapt and he can't practice as much, that's where I think they actually are fast starters, but potentially like the B, C, D plan, because they have the extra kind of physical shortcoming, is where they might actually be found out. So especially come best of fives, like, can he play 5 games in a day and not have the physical side be at least like 10 to 20% relevant? Like, probably not. Which is like, it feels shit. Like, it feels we're being robbed of something because of that.
So the other,
I hope it's overblown.
So the other thing for G2 is very special in the way they draft and the amount of strategies they have. I think the flexibility in draft will definitely carry over to MSI, but I'm not sure how surprised and how vulnerable the other teams will be. I think OG was a very rigid team in a sense. They like their 4-1 style. They like playing the way they play. I think IG will be a lot more flexible. I think SKT will be a lot more flexible dealing with G2's like special kind of style. So I think G2 will get a lead in draft due to the amount of champions they're able to flex, and they have the biggest pool by far of any team coming into the tournament. So draft they will win, but in terms of strategy, how much they'll get a lead, that's where I think the question is. And I think it is arguable, like G2 can be second, SKT can be second. I think those two are very close. Personally, for me right now, I want to lean more into G2 being second, even with the Mickey X problems. I think Wonder is great. I think Caps is great. The biggest question marks are Jankos and Promiscu. But I think everyone else on G2 is going to be able to hold their own. Their bot lane will be worse than SKT for sure. But I think the solo laners mean so much more right now.
Like, the main issue I have with this is I agree with you. Like, as soon as I heard like how really serious it was with Mickey X, that And that does just sort of kill the hype a bit, because you want it to be that all these champions come in prime form, and it really is like, it's like the quickening in Highlander. It's like they all just come to one place in battle, and then let's see who really is the best. Because actually, this was one of the few MSIs where you could start making a case that a European team would win, or who knows, maybe Korea doesn't even make the final. These were real things you could claim. I mean, as an aside, it's a bit of a shame, unfortunately, that like the LMS lost the big names to LPL and they went on a sunning and was shit, because LMS is not going to be relevant at this tournament. We don't even have to include them, basically. But I would even spin it the other way, though. There is one ray of hope, I would say, for G2, which is this. Is since they have really, really good individual players, so they're players where they're not thinking like, oh, unless everything's perfect in our team, like, it's over. You just can't, we have no chance. Players like that always just want to have all they want is a shot. Just give them a chance in the game to do what they can do. I could actually see a world in which that causes them to go on like an inspired Cinderella-esque run, because in Counter-Strike, we have this phenomenon where when a player knows that he's going to be kicked out of a team, and the team know they're going to kick him out, it's just they can't kick him out right now because, they've got a tournament left to play, or, the contract won't make... They won't be able to figure out the contract negotiations or get the next player for, say, 2 months from now. You sometimes get the phenomenon that, yes, most times the player plays even worse because he's demoralized and the team goes out. Who gives a fuck anyway? Every now and then, though, you will get a time where it actually makes the team play better. Because what happens is people are now freed from being in the system and the paradigm of like,
unburdened.
You've got to be improving. Yeah, you've got to like build towards something. You've got to improve. It's like instead what you do is you just go and you say, we'll throw caution to the wind. Let's do whatever this tournament. Yeah, you do this, I do this. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out. And essentially you remove all the pressure from yourself. So if they have that mentality, I could see a world in which they, as you're saying, they go even more bold. They try all these crazy flexes that they've got. They try having Perks play mid one game. They try doing some bizarre early, like, triple teleport ganks on people that normally wouldn't make sense if you were trying to play properly. Because I have to say, in the past, some Western teams, I think NA teams especially, have fallen into the trap of getting to the international competition, doing those first scrims, losing the first games, and then going, shit, wipe the whole blackboard clean, just copy whatever they're doing. And I think at G2, if anything, won't do that.
And the best part about this MSI is this was the time. You already alluded to a bit, you set the on. Like, whenever we went to international events as like a casting team before, you'd come in and one of the, big four regions analysts had already, was already done at the first meeting. They're like, yeah, we got no chance. Like, NA's out this time, guys. Like, we got no chance at this tournament. Like, or EU was saying that 1 year, or China's saying that 1 year. Like, there was always at least one region who were like already, they were just like, yeah, it's cool we're here, but like we're not going to win. Like, we got no chance. And like this was the one, because of how Worlds was, where every region, even Team Liquid, obviously not maybe with the goal of winning it all, but like of like having a way better performance than NA has in the past, could come in and everyone's for once got a legit argument of this is the story of how we won. And to varying degrees, you're sitting there be like, yeah, that could happen. And like, that has not been true for so long, because Korea was always going to win. And that's why the full power EU would we're going to try and play with hope for Mickey that he'll be able to perform. But this was supposed to be that tournament. And to some degree it still is. And I think we should tell it that way, because if it's not this time, it never is. Like, this is really the tournament where, like, before it was like you're doing your percentages, and like Korea was like 80%, China was 15%, and then like Flash Wolves, the best European team, was like the last 5%, right? And then this is the tournament where if you all right, what are your percentages, PapaSmithy? It was going to be a lot more like
bunch of 30s and 20s.
Yeah, like the highest IG might be 40 or 38, and then SKT might be like 28 to 30, and then like G2 might be like 20%, and then there's still way more percentages. Like teams of like
what about TL?
Times their percentages by 10. If let's say TL was 2% to win MSI last year,
yeah,
like I don't think that's even like crude. Like they just weren't going to win MSI. Like they're 15 to 20% this time. That's way more, or like 10 to 15. Like there's something, because they've got internal consistency. They've leveled up in a lot of areas. And there's no more, they play in NA lull. It's like, oh, C9 were a good team. TL were a good team. TSM were a good team. FlyQuest had their moments. Like already you have more than just two teams that were relevant at every moment. And your region isn't just done before it started because, by the way, Korea's going to win. Like it's so fucking hyped that IG is here as world champions, but they're the defending region of, a region that's had no international period of success outside of like season 2 tournaments, like the fucking Stars War League that I cast. Like there was no like.
They did win last year's MSI. RNG was pretty good for most of the year.
Agreed. I'm just saying, like, this is the first time that's ever happened.
Sure.
And now we're moving to 2019. And it's like, all right, how are we looking now? And IG and RNG are so hard to compare, right? Because RNG were the ultimate bot lane focused team, and then the meta change in IG were the ultimate multiple carry team. Like, we finally get the first tournament. And it's like, IG are defending world champions at MSI from the LPL, looking to like the LPL this year has the real shot of forcing Korea into the play-ins in 2020. If LPL on average performs better in international tournaments, Korea plays in the play-ins next year. Well, it's like that happens because LPL is better over the course of 2 years. This is the point where we really get that confirmation. IG won the domestic title. They're the world champions. The meta seems to suit them. They're overwhelming favorites for this tournament to me, because what is the thing you point at to say this is why they lose, given that whether you're talking like macro things of world champions, domestic champions, dominant early game team and an early game meta, like there's nothing to throw at them. Like they are the favorites. The only people that are complaining are people who, have that whole, if everyone's talking about us, that's going to affect it because I believe in superstition. Like that's the only people who are should be dogging this team. They should be the big favorites here. And we're going to learn something about IG and the LPL from this tournament. LCK with a chip on its shoulder, really, for the first time in a long time. We're going to learn something about SKT. G2 winning in style and being ahead of the meta and aggressive meta that fits them more than, say, SKT, for example. We're going to learn something. And TL upgrading in multiple positions and having a lot of internal consistency, they shouldn't be a huge disappointment. We're going to learn something. Like this is the hype tournament. It's why I was announced to be casting MSI when this show started like 2 hours ago. Like this is the international event where I want to come in and see everyone telling me why their region wins. And there's going to be no one that I can just flick off and be like, haha, I'm LCK caster here. There should be nothing like that, because it's all up for grabs. And that's so fucking hype. It's never happened before.
Agree with you, but I think it's going to be a 3-horse race. I think TL not being able to play true carries topside, and Irelia, Akali, Vladimir, Rise even to a certain degree is so big in a tournament with where the other top laners are Dashai,
Agreed,
Khan, Wonder. Like it's so problematic.
No, but in context, what he said makes sense. Like their chance is clearly much higher than last year, and even taking into account that yes, they're not exactly playing the most effective style in the meta. Their players alone are better than last year. Like think about part of what happened last year was like Ole just lost his mind and subbed himself out. That isn't going to be happening this year. Yeah. There is no player. There is no Paul Belter factor of like, oh, he never does well at national. It's Jensen now. It's the same person everyone's been sucking his dick for 4 years because he got down out of groups at Worlds every time. So like their lineup now is a way better chance. I'm with Papa on that one. It's like even if they're certainly not at all the favourite, they probably still do have a 10% chance to win the tournament. Like that's the 10% where everything goes great. Some other teams maybe have issues. They lock into their start. Maybe the meta slightly suits them more on that patch. Who knows? Maybe they find one carry that Impact can play in the top lane. Whatever it could be. We all know unexpected things happen at international play, and especially when teams have never played each other before. So yes, they're not going to win, but there is a chance. It's definitely not zero, put that way.
You can't be browbeat for this tournament. If you're browbeat for this tournament, like, this is the tournament where you got to come and look for something and have real hope. And then, yes, the hope might be dead in a year and a half where LPL won every tournament for 2.5 years, right? But it's not there now. And if we don't embrace it now, you're missing a unique opportunity, because with just how many things there are, no one's making definitive judgments right now. Everyone's saying, well, given this, I think this. And no one's just there saying, by the way, SKT wins. Like, there's a real chance SKT wins here. The Korean fans are very confident. I talked to Korean pros who are like, they're playing so well in scrims. And I'm like, okay, but first you're Korean and like, you want SKT to win. That makes sense. And secondly, all you see is you gravitate so much towards the style that right now doesn't seem to fit the meta. Like, what you think of is what you want to see from teams to play in this flawless play. We don't know how well that travels. Yes, you scrim against Chinese teams, LMS teams, but this is the time to cast doubt to that. We can't just fully hand them the title just here. So if SKT wins, it's not an upset story. But right now, we get to sit here, speculate, and no one's just a biased analyst. Everyone actually gets to believe something. So
Sure.
Fucked it, I'm going to enjoy it while I can, you know?
One thing I wanted to ask you about. So this was like a huge.
Wait there a minute. I didn't give my thoughts on
Okay,
this yet. So
go ahead.
I want your thoughts.
So I'll go like this. First, for G2, aside from the Mickey X factor, I can't possibly know how that'll play into it. So assuming he plays and he is comparable to the Mickey X that you saw in LEC, the main issue for me is really who is going to be second out of G2 and SK Telecom. So what I'm interested therefore is, like, I feel like the strengths are so obvious and they're cross-map, which is if Wonder really is the player Papa implied he is, the best Western player, then again, you know what? Khan is a very fucking brittle top laner. He either does really well or he doesn't do very well when he's behind. So I think actually Khan is going to be the X factor for SK Telecom the whole tournament, and especially against G2. Because if they play around Wonder like they have done in LEC, they can actually have a chance to beat SK Telecom. That can really happen. But if SK Telecom look at the map and say, well, Wonder is good, but he's not the shy. Like, we don't have to just play to the top side. SK Telecom has the bot lane. Like, they might have the best bot lane at this tournament. So that can definitely be a strength for them. And I would say this, going on in the tournament, I look at the rest of the tournament, and I definitely agree with Papa's angle there, which is that regardless of how their style fits the meta, what's great about the SK Telecom style is even if it isn't literally enforced by the meta, it will always have its own natural advantage, which is you don't have to be the one who makes the big play when all the lights are on you and it's a big final. You don't have to be the guy who has a timer on his champion of the next 10 minutes he must do something, and everyone in the map knows that. That automatically brings its own strength in the same way as at times when it wasn't that great to be super aggressive, super aggression always carries with it surprise factor. So these things have their own stylistic inherent factor. So if they can make it to the playoffs, that is a really nice style to have against teams like, you know what, G2 hasn't won a massive international tournament. Some of those guys might feel a bit of the fear when they get into a big semi-final. The problem is this, I don't see how either team realistically beats IG because as Papa said, they don't actually have a weakness. Like, they would if games went 50 minutes, but that doesn't happen. Like, IG is going to win or lose within 35 minutes, basically. So if you look at it, one of the most underrated things about IG is because people saw Worlds, they think, oh, they're just a solo lane team. Well, they are in terms of who the best players are. But what is ridiculous is they have a very competent bot lane. And their bot lane basically is used to playing without having all the resources. So across the board, IG is a very dangerous team. Anyone who's hoping, yeah, but what about all those great mid laners? You know, we're sending Caps and we're sending Faker. If you watch the LPL semi-finals, that TOP played against IG, you will see that having an amazing mid laner ain't enough against IG. Because I personally think Knight is better than Caps or Faker right now. Just go watch the LPL. The guy is unbelievably good. It didn't matter. And he was popping off that series as well. It did not matter. Like, you have got to have a lot more as a team to beat this team. And especially, everyone has to look at the top lane in this tournament. Because that's why, for me, TL has a very, very hard route. They have one of the worst top lanes in the tournament. Wonder's very, very good, but Wonder isn't used to playing someone like the Shy on a regular basis. Like, that guy is absurdly good. And especially, that's where I'm very interested to see if SK Telecom goes against IG, I can't see how Khan stands up against the Shy. That's my biggest problem with that matchup.
So, Papa, how do you feel about Khan? Because I feel like Khan actually leveled out a lot more than he used to in the past, where people are like, oh, Khan of the old, the Jace Khan, the Kingzone Dragon X Khan was so much better. I think that Khan got so much resource. He had Prey and Gorilla on his team. The jungler pretty much lived topside only and was playing the best carry picks with the jungler always supporting him. So he looked much better, but I think the Khan on this SKT is a little bit more well-rounded. I know he didn't look that hot at finals, but
Put it this way, Khan on Kingzone X wasn't born with it. That was Maybelline.
I think you're right, Duncan. That's a great analogy because I think Rock's Peanut into Kingzone Khan is players who were empowered by the team they were playing around, both the personalities and the style the team could play. Like, again, talking to Gorilla about Peanut in 2016, didn't necessarily copy paste to Peanut in 2018, but Peanut said, I'm going to go invade over there, and Smeb and Kuro dropped what they were doing and went to help him. That was what happened. Like, that's how they played the game. It was they were going to play and follow Peanut, you know, and he was going to make the calls, and he was doing well, and they were winning, and Halo effect, it all looked really good. Khan on Kingzone, like you guys are alluding to, Longzhu especially, right? Because 2017 summer split was like the best example of this, but definitely 2018 to some degree as well. It was Khan was allowed to play Khan style, and everyone dropped it so Khan could play his style because Khan's style is applying pressure. It's usually on carries like Jace. It makes perfect sense in a turret plate meta, right? Because he's a really good 1v1 top laner when he has jungle coverage and when he can push up and he can click his buttons really good. He can outplay on Fiora really good. That style gets you more turret plates. Like there's a lot of reasons why Khan should be very strong. But they had Prey and Gorilla on that team who got nothing, never got any jungle priority at all, played Tahm Kench Ashe every game, Tahm Kench Ezreal, and farmed it out on low econ, and everything went to Khan. And so that style played into Khan, and it worked till it didn't, basically, is how it went for Kingzone. On SKT, he can't play that style every game. Like, he needs to be able to have the dog games, but also have the games where it's all about him. And that's been an integration project that's been very interesting to watch. Like, I think we want to forget the semifinal when you're talking about Khan's recency, because Khan was very poor in the semifinal. And it's Kingzone. You talked about that with LS when it was on that episode. I don't think Khan has proven to be able to play consistently well when he doesn't have resources around his lane. He will have good games where he's able to have top lane a sense, but I always looked at Smeb as the player who was so good at turning his brain on to tank matchups and carry matchups in the past, where if he was on a tank, like his top laner sense of like, this is when I can't push up a lane, I'm not going to get greedy to push up, I'm not going to look for a solo kill now, was the best of any top laner I've ever seen. Marin, for example, was able to always apply pressure, and SKT understood how to play around the fact that he would die to the level 4 gank every time. Because he would always die to it. Every time, he was always going to push up, and if you want kills, go up there, get your Magi stacks, he's going to die again. Like, this is the reality of how he played. But it didn't matter because the game was a different game, and you play like that. I think Khan has had good periods, like a couple of weeks where he's able to do both. But I feel like he's two kind of bad performances away to suddenly, if you don't play towards him, then it's going to have a noticeable like target on his back that can be exploited. So MSI is like a 2-week kind of spurt, and there's a real chance that it doesn't show up. But in a best of 5 against IG, game 1, I'm just camping Khan and seeing what can come out. Because just like turret plates are pinata, if you go top lane, camp the shit out of Khan, and then he dies 10 times, and they lose game 1, that's going to have a noticeable depression on the overall team mood, and especially on Khan's mood. And that's what you try to exploit. And does it work? We don't know. We can't know. Yeah. It can depend on many factors and on the day, and maybe Koma's grinding multiple scrims where they're trying to retrain that. But Khan doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be able to play the reserved style and the carry style interchangeably as needed, because he hasn't done that at any point in his career for more than 2 weeks. So we get to find out, and that's why IG is the coolest team to talk about. You haven't asked me to talk about IG. I really want to talk about them before we're done. Right. IG came into Worlds last year, and they were not we were like, this is going to be the LPL's tournament, but we meant RNG largely. That was the team that people had really high expectations about, because they were the team that was proven. They won MSI. They had a clear style. It seemed like they would get there. The meta was different at Worlds than we completely could have appreciated at the start, blah, blah, blah. IG were the team that flexed on people, that played super aggressive at all points. Even when there weren't turret plates, they were playing like there were turret plates. They would try a lot of things. Ning would have so many amazing games, and so many games were just purely inted. And this split, they're pretty similar to that. Like, they lost more series, yes, but there are games where, there were so many reviews where I'm reviewing games in week 7 of the season. I'm like, yeah, IG are the favorites for MSI, when we don't know who's qualified. People like, didn't you see this game where they just inted all over the place? And I'm like, yes, I saw that. Didn't you see the Worlds where after they had inted and done aggressive things with no idea of how to macro a team fight, they went to Worlds, adapted to the tournament meta, and played very smart League of Legends for the majority of it. Like, IG didn't come into Worlds and then just flex on everyone in solo lanes and have no macro. Like, they actually were able to get to a very decent level of macro where it wasn't necessarily their strength, but it wasn't a reason to count them out. And that allows me this year to say they use regular season LPL, kind of like how RNG give Uzi a holiday till the first break. IG do use it to try stuff, and they do turn their brains off around parts of the game. And
well, they tried to peak, like I was saying, the Koreans don't, right?
They basically play LPL regular season like it's a lot of teams would play scrims. They're like, we're doing it this time, and Ning dives in there, and he's like, I go in as a Kane and go and level 2 gank their Krugs and kill the Sejuani trying to take Krugs. Oops, I died. And then it doesn't matter because their solo lanes are so strong, and we now know from Worlds that come MSI, they're not just going to brainlessly end the whole tournament away and lose from there. That's not what we saw at Worlds. It would be a surprise if we saw that here. So we can now say IG is a team that uses regular season LPL to test out certain things, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt for Worlds or MSI in this case, until we shouldn't. And then given that they have the strong players that they've been able to apply to a tournament meta before, the early game has early game gold, and their aggressive style seems to fit it, it seems very impossible for me to not come in right now and say IG, 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 and fly the flag until I get a big enough set of games to be able to update my opinion. I'm a big believer on everything I can see shows this. And if I get there and I get those coaches' votes that say SKT is going to win, then I'm going to be surprised.
I have one last comment to make on the whole Khan thing, and then there isn't any time left. So after this, basically, we'll have to make it final comments and wrap it up. Local. We can't do the MVP discussion. We'll do that some other time.
Sure.
So one thing to say about Khan is my biggest problem with him is I'll make a quick distinction. I actually think he is a very good League of Legends player. I don't think he's a very good top laner though. And the reason I make that distinction is it reminds me of the really old, we're going back quite far now, half a decade, the old wars that used to go on in private and sometimes occasionally in public between Kelsey and Froscorin and Monty over whether Claylove was actually a good jungler. Mm-hmm. And I actually think this is one area I actually have a strength in talk shows that some people almost seem oblivious to this, which is when I listen to two people discuss something, I don't just listen to the sentiment they're saying. I try to ask how they're setting it up, and therefore I'm able to sometimes notice that they actually aren't disagreeing sometimes. They're just saying it in a way that makes them think they're disagreeing. So the conclusion I came to, the way I resolved the Gordian knot of old school Claylove, and I will say this in the caveat that in the latter years, he did actually become more of a traditional jungler, and he did actually sometimes just gank and play low econ, stuff that he never did early on. In the era we're talking about this argument was when he literally used to just farm up.
Baby.
So think of Cloud9 Meteos in the early days. He would just farm all day long. Same concept. Meteos basically was like a NA Claylove. The logic was if he farms all game long, but you can't kill his team at that point, he just comes into team fights as another carry. And now all of a sudden you're not in a team fight with the AD carry got ahead in lane and he's good, and the mid lane has items. It's like you've got those players on his teams, World Elite, EDG, but then you've also got this guy who basically is got carry level strength, either as an aggressive champion with damage or like Meteos and Cloud9, insane level of health like that. Now the jungler can zone you off. So what I used to do, the way I resolved the Gordian knot between the two groups of people, is I said, what you have to do, Chinese analysts, is acknowledge that he's not actually a very good jungler for what a jungler does in League of Legends at the moment. If you look at the best Korean junglers, they're going to be much better suited as junglers because of how the game is played around vision and invading and dividing up the map. He's not doing any of those things. But Monty's actually wrong if he says he's a terrible player. As a player, if you can make what he does work, he's a very good player. In fact, he brings you a very unique strength that no one else almost has, except for the example of Meteos, for example. That's not as relevant internationally. Now, the way I would apply that to Khan is my problem is this. If you give him the resources, if you give him the right lanes, and he gets going in the game, he can take over the whole game. He could win you the whole game. He could win you a whole tournament. The problem is this, is as an actual top laner, since top lane is so powerful right now, it's not just that your top lane has to do well. There's also the second factor. You cannot let the other top laner snowball. That's the problem Khan has, is he is, that's why I say he's brittle, Loco. Because his point is he's really good, but if it goes wrong, he breaks apart. He just crumbles. Mm-hmm. Now, that is one thing at the moment as a top laner I do not believe you can do. You either have to be the best top laner, wander in Europe, the Shy, because you're then going to snowball the lanes, you're going to win all your lanes, you're going to dominate the game. Or if you can't be that, if you are even second best, you must bend but not break. You cannot be the guy who just fractures and gives the game to the other top laner. Because if that other top laner comes out of lane with 3 kills, and it is the Shy, it is Wonder, this isn't the game, as we've been talking about for the whole episode, where you can chill back and grind out these small little 1% like deficits away. It doesn't work like that. Like, the game is over when you give the Shy 3 kills on a champion that he's strong on, like Harry. So that's my problem with Khan, basically. It's like, as an overall player, I think he's a good player, but for what you need from top lane, he's a big liability at the moment, or at least, at very least, an X factor. Like, he has to play well, I think.
X factor to me is the bigger one. He can do those things. He just hasn't been able to do them over sample sizes. So that's the part that's going to be on the test. And it's an international event. He's not going to be, in his comfort. That's what we're going to be testing here. And if he goes the whole group stage showing those tenets, given how tight the schedule is, he might be able to play that way the whole tournament.
Like, this is the reason, Loco, why when we had that whole debate last year about Whipple versus Soaz, one of the reasons I revere players like Soaz is these guys, when they get behind, they don't just get, the game isn't over. They're like, right, well, I don't like the sort of game state I'm in now, but let's go to work now, right? What's my B game? What's my C game? What do I do when this guy is 2 kills up? How do I stop him getting to 4 kills before the end of the laning phase? How do I still get some CS without now knowing I'm probably never going to win the lane? I can never get that advantage. Like, their mentality is amazing for big pressure games. The problem is, Khan hasn't shown that he has that gear yet, especially not internationally, obviously.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much the end. Did you have any final comments, Loco? Because it did take the hour up. As I told you, I didn't have an hour. Whatever. See the things I do for you, motherfucker? Anyway.
Thanks, Dorian. Well appreciated. Well, I mean, I just want to thank Papa for being here, Dorian for putting out with me again. Papa, do you have any final words?
I did it. I came on this show. I came on Thorin content. I got something to point to people. See you in 4 years.
Dude, what is it? Do you remember, like, in off season, like, I talked to you a lot about coming on to do our show and, like, listen Locos, and, like, we would talk, and then you would stop talking to me the moment I asked. Like, what was up with that? I wanted you on the show.
Do you want me to come back on the show again?
Okay, okay, never mind.
You know when you're in a nightclub, Loco, and you're both young guys, you're not like men with experience, men of the world who, have got like confidence under your feet, experience. You're both guys who you're sort of faking it till you make it. You're both in a nightclub, right? And you both look out there and you're doing what in England we call assessing the talent.
Yeah.
Bird watching, as we also call it. You're looking out there and you're looking and you're going, oh, fucking hell, she's hot. And then you go, oh. And then one of you goes, go and talk to that girl over there. Now, what you do in this moment, Loco, is if you were a man who was 10 years older with a whole lifetime behind him, a career, all these like qualities you've developed in yourself, you'd have the conversation, you go, you know what, I will. You go over there, you talk to him. What you do if you're a young guy is you say like, yeah, I could, but you won't. You go and talk to her. And then what you do is collectively, you try and find out who can bitch out, but like in the most like saving a bit of face. Like you're like, well, but actually, you know what? On my second drink, I'm still on my first drink. I need to get in. I need to like warm up a little bit. That's basically what was going on between you two in the off season. You were like sort of trying to work yourself up to get the courage to come and do it, but you weren't ready yet. You had to wait. You had to let a whole LCK season happen. You had to wait till I got the prediction wrong for the final. And then you thought, right, now it's safe. Now we can do this. And there you go.
Wow. Well, Papa, thank you so much for being on. Very much appreciated. And I can't wait to have you back on.
See you in 4 years, baby.
Oh, my God.